Happy New Year.
Hello.
Hello. Happy 2023.
Yeah.
My name's David.
And my name's Brienne.
And this is Now Let's Be Honest. And we are excited to have you here for our first live stream of 2023.
It is. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting, right? New year, same channel.
Yeah.
But we got even better stuff planned for this year. Today we are going to be talking about The Chosen Season 3, Episode 4. And look who's with me. Brienne's with me. She wasn't with me in the last episode because you were sick, I think, right? Yeah, you were sick, so you didn't get to be here last time. So that was unfortunately a worse video. But Brienne's here with us today, and so it's going to be a better video for y'all. Be sure to say hi in the live chat so that we can greet you, and we'll just kind of just have some general jibber jabber talk until people show up. Also, let me see. I kind of want to like lower this lighting a little bit. Yeah. Oh yeah, look at that.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, that's I kind of like the blue in the background, so we're just gonna do that. Okay, let's see. Comments over here. Happy New Year and Shalom, David. Yes, Shalom. Hello. So, what did you think of the episode, and did you like it more than the first three? I guess you'll have to stay tuned in because we will talk about that in a second. What's up? I don't know. What's up with you? Just sitting in my room over here, getting ready to talk about The Chosen for a while. So that's what we're doing. How are y'all doing? Hi from Ohio.
Oh, nice.
Hello from Texas. Hello from West Virginia. Look at that. Wow. See, that's what I love about YouTube. You know, it's so cool that we can just like have a bunch of different believers from just all over the place getting together to talk about Jesus. And obviously we're talking about a TV show, but the TV show is about biblical stuff. And I mean, only like 5% of it is biblical, but you get what I'm saying. It's exciting. Yeah. It's really cool. And it's just cool. Hello from Dayton. Cool. Hello. Hi.
Nice.
Hello. Cool. So yeah, oh, real quick, I forgot. I had to embarrass Brienne here because look what we got here. My mom went to a little New Year party, and so I was gonna wear it myself, but it doesn't really fit my head, and you know then it'd be like out the screen. So Brienne, here you go. She got a little New Year hat for us just to celebrate the New Year. She won't be wearing it the whole time because that would just embarrass the heck out of her. But I had to have her wear it for a little bit just to publicly shame her on the internet. Gaius this episode was B-A. Oh, yeah, that is a word. Well, it was better than finishing the Vikings-Packers game. LOL. Hi from Minnesota. That's funny. Yeah. I got to say, I don't watch a lot of football, so I can't testify there. But just got a chance to watch episode 3 today, right in time for episode 4. Finally caught up. Episode 3, I loved. I like this episode too. But we'll talk about that in just a second. I'm about to watch it now. LOL, I'm late. Heard it's amazing, though. It is amazing. So far, I don't think there's been an episode of the show that hasn't been amazing. A tiara with a feather. That is different. You know, it is different.
It says Happy New Year.
It's definitely a choice. And yeah, it's a choice. You don't have to wear that whole thing the whole time if you don't want to. But there you go.
It got its moment to shine.
Yeah, there is her moment to shine. Happy New Year. Cool. All right. Well, while people are still tuning in, and we'll check back in the live chat as we go throughout this, let's talk spoiler-free first, and then we're just going to walk through the episode. What did you think about episode 4?
I really liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought it was good. It covered a lot of stuff.
It did.
Like, talking about the disciples, and then, like, Eden, and then a completely different family, and then the Pharisees. And so it covered a lot in that one episode, I felt like.
Definitely a big change of pace.
Yes.
I think that's, like, the biggest thing for me. We were actually talking about this before the episode started. I naturally really like kind of slower paced things, which is ironic because my mind thinks on I live on fast like double speed because like whenever I watch YouTube videos and stuff like that, I'm always like listening at double speed and stuff. Like I like things fast paced, but when it comes to television shows and stuff like that, I really like things like that are just like long and drawn out and everything. And so I think if anything, that's probably why I might have favored episode 3 over episode 4. Yeah. And I think in general, that's why I've kind of liked the episode 3s of each season so much because a lot of those are more character focused and they're not as much plot centric as they are just like really diving deep into who these characters are and stuff and just slowing down. I really like that. This episode was really good, but there's just so many moving parts. It's like I almost have to just like rewatch it more times to know where I stand with it.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a really good episode and there was just a whole lot of stuff. And I mean, this isn't really much of a spoiler, I don't think. Because it's literally before the credits even roll. We have the whole like 2x2 stuff that happens before the opening credits. Whereas originally I had anticipated them like spending more time with that.
A little bit more.
And once again, I don't look into any of the behind the scenes stuff or anything. So I mean, maybe like the Snipe Life, and they might have known this for a long time that it was going to be so short. I was expecting us to be with them longer, but I think how they handled it was really well done. Yeah, there's just a whole lot here, and it's a 2-parter. right? Because this was just clean part 1, and then clean part 2 is next week, and so this is just a 2-part episode, which is crazy.
A lot going on.
Yeah, a whole lot going on. Let's see what we got here. Oh, hi everyone. Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm trying to think what else we can talk about. We are going to get into spoilers pretty quickly just because for the sake of this not being a super duper long 4-hour live stream. Let's see, what can we talk about? The cinematography, the choices, especially with the opening thing, really good. I liked it. Is black and white, which that's not really a spoiler because literally it's the opening part. It actually freaked me. It confused me at first.
All of us were like,
yeah, because what we do is I lead a discipleship group thing on Sunday nights. And last week we were off, so it kind of worked out for Christmas Day and everything. But this week, what we did is we just moved it back because usually we go 6 to 8 p.m. But this time I was like, hey, let's do 5 to 7, and then we watch the episode together at 7 p.m. And so a lot of us were watching it, and we were sitting there, and it started playing in black and white. And I thought that the color on my TV screen or something had gone out. And I was like, mainly just like, it wasn't even because the episode started out there. It was because even, it was like the opening logos and stuff were black and white.
The Loaves and Fishes and the Angel Studios.
Yeah, and that's what threw me off to where literally like before the episode even started, I was like, wait, no, Brienne, pause it real quick. And like, let me check. And like, I pulled it up on like my phone to see like, and I was like, oh no, sure enough, it's black and white.
Yeah.
And then I went later on, I was like, oh no, it goes to color. So yeah, that threw me off though first. I liked it. I did like it. Black and white. It just kind of makes things look really classy.
It does.
You know?
It does.
But it really did throw me off at first just because the logos were black and white. I was like, oh, I think our TV went out in like color. I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. But I was like, did I mess something up with the settings? Because we did it on Roku and we were scrolling to the Angel Studios. Oh, that was in color. It was only once I clicked play. And I was like, I think I did something wrong. I don't know what I did, but it ended up being a very good artistic choice, but I thought it was cool. I'd be interested to know what the motives were behind it, because a lot of the choices they've done, like there was like a big purpose behind it. Like in episode 3 of season 2, they had that really long oneer. Remember, it was like one shot, like really drawn out. Like there's purpose behind it. They might just do it just to, make it different, set it apart, which is fine. But I'll be interested. Maybe I'll reflect on it and think more deeply. Let's see what we got here, and then we are going to go into the spoiler discussion, right? All right, let's see. Kind of wished we had longer. The writers in the after show said they wanted the 2x2 longer, but had to basically reduce it to a montage time. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there is a whole lot that needs to be covered, especially what they're just covering just to get the feeding of the 5,000, just because there are certain things that have to be set in motion, biblically speaking, in order to arrive at the feeding of the 5,000 just storyline, right. Which they could change some of that for the show, but they have a lot to cover, and just there's so much that was in the teaser trailers and the trailer for the season that we haven't even begun to address yet. Oh yeah. I'm just thinking like they have so much more to cover just in this season that I understand why they had to condense it. I just wasn't expecting it, honestly. There are a lot of loose ends that'll be tied up in the next one, probably. Yeah, for sure. And a lot of other loose ends that'll probably be planted in the next one going forward. We still haven't seen anything about Gaius's servant. Whereas from the teaser trailer and stuff, or from the trailer, we have reason to think that Gaius' servant is going to be the one that Jesus heals. I'm wondering if that's going to have something to do with like the dirty water thing that we've been seeing here, or, but they haven't mentioned it yet. Whereas I think like if there was a time to introduce it, it would be in this episode, and then like have it drawn out. But they might not want everything to be revolving around that. They might have something else coming on. I don't know. But yeah, there's a whole lot coming in here. Let's see. It's going to be hard to wait for part 2. We've been waiting 2,000 years for Jesus. I think we can wait a week for part 2. Yeah. I like the scenes with Mary and Tamar and Zebedee starting the oil ministry a lot. I actually really enjoyed the interaction between Mary Magdalene and Tamar, because I think Tamar has a lot of stuff to handle there. And I think Mary Magdalene's, she's addressing it. And like you can tell she's uncomfortable, and you can tell like just in the scene. And once again, I'm trying not to spoil stuff right now. We'll talk about it in a second. The stuff with Mary Magdalene and Tamar, I just thought you can see the wheels turning in Mary Magdalene's eyes, like trying to figure out like, how do I handle this in like a gracious way? Yeah. While also like standing up for stuff. Yeah. And she might not have done it perfect. I don't know, but I thought that was really good. Happy New Year. God bless you all. Happy New Year. Yes. Happy New Year. I was confuzzled about the black and white thing too. Yeah. It was very confusing. I did like it, but it did throw me off. I thought I connected the wrong wire or something on my TV, and then I checked my phone. Oh yeah, I'm wrong. Just the intro. Yeah. It's one of those things where I wonder if they did it on purpose, because they could have had the logos in color and then gone to black and white. I don't think anybody would have questioned it, but I think the logo thing is what threw everybody off, where it's like, what's happening? I don't know. That's interesting. The black and white intro. Wow. First, that is the first time they did that. And they also could be just doing things different because in past seasons they've always had different type of intros. Like, they've had like flashbacks to like the Old Testament stuff. They really haven't had that so far this season. So maybe they're just trying to do different stuff it's kind of like a cold open in many ways. Also, I love that they added the Lord's Prayer in full again. Second time this season after cutting it short in season 1, episode 3, and season 2, episode 7. Yeah, we are getting the Lord's Prayer time and time again. Probably because people are so familiar with it, and also it's a nice connective tissue that shows the disciples growing. I love the different filmmaking, artistic choices they do. Yeah, it's just artistically good stuff.
Yeah,
so cool.
I agree.
All right, you ready to talk spoilers?
Yeah.
All right, let's walk through this. Let me put up my little spoiler banner here so everybody knows that we are going into spoiler territory. Once again, feel free to follow along with us in the live chat and let us know your thoughts before we get into this. Let's see. By the way, so the intro was their first mission. Are we going to see the second mission in the following episodes? I don't think that they're going to do any more stuff like that necessarily in this season at all. They might have them do stuff like that in the future, but I think that's probably all we're going to see in this season. One thing I'm realizing is that I love the idea of seeing Jesus in person and being with him, but now I can see the limitations of his incarnation. Several times there were issues where the disciples, I think they were just kind of cut off because of the limitations on the YouTube chat. There's a lot of places where like we see some conflict arising here, and there was actually one place in particular where I actually looked at it, I was like, I wonder if Jesus would respond that way. It comes near the end of the episode. Well, I mean, Jesus is literally only in the episode for like one short little part.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll talk about that when we get there. But I'm going to reflect on that a little bit. But there was a lot of stuff where following Jesus would be a lot more frustrating than a lot of people think it would be. And I think you see that in the Gospels. And that's our fault, not his. Yeah. I read something that said the reason it was black and white was because the apostles were doing things with Jesus' authority without understanding. Okay. So they're seeing things dimly.
Yeah.
Kind of that makes sense.
Yeah.
If not, it's just a good explanation. Am I the only one who really dislikes John right now? I didn't really dislike John. I think it was just in line with their character. Yeah, I thought it was fine. I think the whole, it's because your name is James, right? It's because you're on James's side, aren't you? I think the whole Peter Gaius thing is setting up the servant thing. Probably. I like Gaius more and more each time they interact. He's just a cool dude. Needed to or should have addressed Jesus, but he wasn't there. Oh, this is going back to the comment before. We have access to him at all times because he indwells us. We can talk to him whenever. We can read the Bible. We're better off. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of benefits that we have that the disciples themselves didn't have, for sure. Also, Jesus seems like a side character here. We do have to remember the show is called The Chosen, right? The show is not called Jesus. Jesus technically, in the show, he is the one the show revolves around, but he is not the key protagonist of the show. You'll notice that the covers of the show, like when it comes to like the DVDs and stuff, have not had Jesus on the cover. They've had season 1 was Peter, season 2 was Mary Magdalene. Don't know who season 3 is going to be, but maybe Matthew or something like that. In my thumbnails, I've got a Matthew. Yeah, amazing chat. Love you, brother. Yeah, hey Dante. All right, let's go into spoiler territory and let's talk through this. We start off with the black and white scene, which we've already been kind of talking about. And this really just encapsulates the whole 2x2 mission that we had introduced in season 3, episode 2 episodes ago. And really, I think we don't know exactly how long has passed here.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, it's probably been months. I don't think they ever said explicitly how long it's been, but we know that at the very least, I talked about this in one of my earlier episodes from last week. Season 2, episode 4 and 5 took place during the Feast of Tabernacles, and that is in October. And then the last episode, season 3, episode 3, took place at Rosh Hashanah, which is in September. That's 11 months apart. Yeah. Which in the show doesn't feel like it's been that long, but I guess 11 months have passed since then. But we don't know exactly when the Rosh Hashanah thing took place. And so we have reason to think, I guess maybe Jesus was wandering around for a little bit, then he eventually went back to Nazareth, and he was only there for like 2 days. Yeah. And so we don't know if that was early on, later on, I don't know, but he does show back up in this episode. And so he's back. And so we are after that time period, but then also, according to the Gospels, and once again, I don't know if the show is going to follow this timeline, but in the Gospels, the feeding of the 5,000 takes place shortly before the Passover, because everybody's that's why there's such big crowds, because people are heading down to the Passover, which is during like March or April time period. And so really we're probably looking at and the apostles return from their mission shortly before the feeding of the 5,000. And so I would say that we're maybe like a month or two prior to that. So this would maybe be like February time period. And so if Jesus was over there in September and it's February, like it's like 5 months or something like that. So they could be playing a little bit fast and loose with the timeline in the show. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's just biblically speaking, trying to take guesses there. But they've been gone for a while. That's all I was trying to say there.
Yeah.
And so we track with them. And once again, it's all shot in black and white, very crisp, very beautiful. And we see just each of the different groups going around doing their thing. We see John and Thomas going around healing people. We see Andrew and Philip. They're also healing people. And we see more focus on them teaching. And then they're being rejected by the people. They're being dragged out. And you'll notice that the people are dressed a little bit differently. That's because these are Hellenistic Jews. So they're Jews who have been kind of influenced by Greek culture. Or not kind of, largely influenced by Greek culture. We see Nathaniel and Thad healing blind people. And I believe one place is that they're raising a dead person.
That's what I thought.
Which is interesting because I don't think we've seen Jesus raising a dead person yet in the show, right? We're going to probably in the next episode. But so far we haven't. And I thought that was interesting because... we actually see them raising one before Jesus, which is kind of crazy. And then we have Simon and Judas. We have them stealing crowds. So you have like this like witch maker dude who's like cutting up stuff, and Simon and Judas just walk up and start like attracting attention. And you see like Simon like motioning to his heart, which seems to suggest that he's just pointing out that it's not about these empty rituals. It's about your devotion to God and stuff like that. Then we also see them healing a demoniac. We see the two Jameses. They're going around preaching, and then we see little James healing a lame person. And once again, just kind of crazy because he has to lean on his crutch to get on his knees to get before this person, and then he gets to put this person's crutch away while he grabs his own crutch to get back up. And it's just kind of like really cool stuff. Then we have Simon, Z, and Matthew going around. They are healing a demoniac. Also, that's actually the first demoniac that we see healed. And then we also see them healing a lame person and then going around preaching as well. And everybody's just shocked by this. And we really see the shock in the first part with Thomas and John, where they're just seeing this. They're like, whoa, that was crazy. And then we have this like little final montage part of them all leading everybody in prayer, in the Lord's Prayer. And it's really cool. So what do you think about that opening scene in the black and white and everything?
I liked it a lot. I think one of my favorite parts was with little James. I loved that part, especially because was it last episode with him and Jesus, or was that in theaters whenever him and Jesus had a conversation? It was just them two.
That was episode 2.
That's episode 2. Okay, yeah. So it's cool because that like conversation had already happened, and so then to see him, he sent out 2 by 2, and now he's like healing people that has the same issue as him. I thought that was really cool. And then I also like how well the disciples like played the part, like how they were super surprised whenever they like healed people and stuff, because that's something you don't like. I guess you don't like think about it. You're like, oh yeah, like Jesus tells you that you're gonna go out and heal people, but think about like the disciples in that moment. They like raise someone from the dead, or like this person who's been like deaf their entire life. Like they're gonna be just as surprised as the people that are healed, and so I thought they did a great job with that.
Yeah, no, I mean that would just be a wild experience, and I thought they played it well because. That is something that you don't like. Even in the Gospels, when you read it, you're kind of like, "Whoa, that'd be crazy to see," but you kind of just move on.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, that's the cool thing about having a show like this is that you actually get to, once again, it's all hypothetical and it's plausible. We don't know how they actually reacted, but I mean, they were humans, and honestly, I think that the disciples were probably like teenagers. I mean, imagine giving a teenager that type of power. I mean, these guys, they would have been reacting crazy like, and so that was just wild. I thought it was really well done. Okay, let's go through some of these comments real quick. We've got a lot of comments here we're going to go through. Let's see. Okay. This series has turned me from an atheist to an agnostic. Haha, wonderful show, no doubt. Well, there you go. We're making progress, Anya. We'll get you eventually. No, that's really cool, Josiah, though. That's neat. This show is mainly about the disciples. Yes, it is. And that's one thing where, I think that's really cool. We just have to keep that in mind. It's not a show that's even cheap. It's not just about adapting scripture. And it's not just about focusing on Jesus. It's actually about trying to see what it's like to be a disciple, which is really useful for us because we're getting to learn about that aspect of it, right? I was very thankful for the black and white when they were showing the dissecting of that bird. That was squeamish. Did not want that color. Yeah, honestly, whenever I saw the dissection of the bird, I was kind of like, maybe that's why they did this in black and white, just to keep it from being like gory or something like that. I think it was okay that Jesus was on screen for 30 seconds because we just had a whole episode with him and his story. Yeah, honestly, I wasn't even expecting him to be in this episode at all.
I wasn't either.
And that was even before I realized that it was going to be about... I thought it was just going to be them out there 2 by 2. So I didn't think he was going to be in it at all. And I was just as surprised as Simon and Eden whenever he showed up at the door.
Yeah.
Peter and Gaius had my favorite scene, I think, although I didn't like Peter disrespecting Jesus. You know, I agree. I don't think anybody should like Peter disrespecting Jesus, but at the same time, we have to recognize that Peter was a human.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't going to be the last time Peter disrespects Jesus, because we at least have, multiple instances of it in Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is whenever Peter rebukes Jesus and says, hey, we're not going to let you die on the cross. That's disrespecting him, because Jesus says, I'm going to do it. So he's disrespecting him there. Later on, whenever Jesus goes to wash Peter's feet, Peter says, I'm not allowing you to do it.
Yeah.
So he talks back to him. And then a few hours later, he denies Jesus. And so Peter, you have to realize that these people were still gradually beginning to understand who Jesus is.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even understand he was God. And unfortunately, even devout Christians have no problem disrespecting God sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's with us understanding who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how irreverently we talk about God sometimes, which is not good, right? I'm not endorsing it, but yeah, I think it's realistic to see him reacting that way. The black and white scene gives me like Harry Potter Chamber of Secrets vibe. That's funny. You haven't seen that one yet, so yeah. Let's see. I'm wondering if Rabbi Yusuf is being developed to a character we'll recognize from later in Scripture, possibly by another name. It will be interesting to see if we learn more about what he wrote. I will talk more about this later, but I think that we actually have confirmation in this episode that he is Joseph of Arimathea, because there was just stuff that was mentioned that I think, because Yusuf is just the Hebrew name for Joseph. And so I think that he is that character. Yeah, I didn't like that either, but Peter was kind of wishy-washy. He was the one who denied Jesus after 3 years. Yeah. All the apostles were like this, right? It's not just Peter. We have to recognize that they were humans, right? We should respect them and we should think that they're awesome, but they were humans, and they had less understanding of who Jesus was than we do, right? A lot of their understanding of Jesus came like afterwards, when they're reflecting on who, like the things that they experienced and the Holy Spirit revealing it to them. These people did not, by and large, recognize that they were dealing with the Son of God. And that's like gradually revealed to them over time. And remember, we're only in season 3.
Yeah.
Among all the apostles, Matthew came from the most drastically different background. I love the scene that Jesus picked him to take notes. From last season. Yeah, for sure. I like the emphasizing the where's Jesus element you read about in the Gospels, where we know what he's doing, but the general public is still unaware. Jesus was having to act in secret quite often because his popularity took off very quickly, and he recognized that being that popular meant he could be killed. Now, no doubt Rabbi Yusuf and the other were sympathizers. Maybe he would become a believer. Yeah, I like what they're doing with Rabbi Yusuf there. I think they've portrayed Simon Peter as the one who feels most comfortable telling Jesus' opinion of how things should go, and that's very consistent with the Gospels. And, I don't think that we should like Peter disrespecting Jesus, but to his credit, I think that Jesus does want us to be honest with him.
Yeah.
Right? So, once again, be respectful. So I think Peter does cross a line, but Peter isn't just giving him false, whatever, he's not just acting like he's happy when he's not. No, he's voicing his concerns, but he's just a bit rash with it, right? And so he does cross a line. I want to believe, but the miracles, it seems so many believed because of what they saw, and here we are 2,000 later with nothing like that, and are to be judged after because it's hard to believe. But Jesus says, blessed are those who have believed and have not seen, right? And so there is a challenge there, but it's worth it. Yes, I thought it'd be crazy to actually have those abilities. Watching them do it puts another perspective for sure. I couldn't imagine healing people like that. I can only imagine the first person they healed and their reaction when the person was healed. It was cool. I thought it was very cool. Jesus' patience is infinite. Maybe not infinite, but it is enduring for thousands of generations. I agreed from a regular human being watching Jesus performing miracles to be able to perform themselves must be shocking to them. Yeah, especially because they talk about it like they recognize it's not their own power. They're like, we literally can't do this. Maybe that's actually one benefit for them doing stuff. Like a lot of the times as Christians, we start living better lives and we start being more righteous and we start thinking, oh, I'm just a good person. Whereas we have to recognize that's Christ working through us.
Yeah.
The benefit for the disciples and the apostles is that they were literally doing things humans are not capable of doing.
Yeah.
And so whenever they did it, they were able to recognize, oh yeah, this is literally just me. Jesus.
Yeah.
And so that's one good thing there. Like they're doing supernatural things, recognizing it's from Jesus.
Yeah.
Also, Simon may baptize Gaius in the near future. Maybe. We haven't really seen any baptisms yet. That's actually something that I'm surprised. Like we haven't had more focus on that.
Yeah.
There really hasn't been any baptisms in the show thus far. We've heard about baptisms, but we haven't really seen any, which is interesting. Well, I was wondering when we were going to see Shmuel. because we saw him on the trailer. But yes, we have Shmuel. I love his character and the actors. Yeah, and we're going to talk about him if we ever get back to the actual description of the thing. Would you be able to provide any predictions on where the story might progress in the next episode, or do you know any big ones? We're going to talk about that at the end. We're going to walk through the episode, and at the very end, I'll give my like brief predictions, and then we'll wrap it up because I've got so many other videos that we're going to cover like over the course of the week. Yeah. Yusuf speaking about his businesses and how he paid for all those supplies, showing him to be wealthy. I took his confirmation of him being Joseph Arimathea. Very good, Micah. Yes, that is what we're going to talk about in a little bit. I just saw the after show. So awesome. Love hearing all the planning of the emotions, the relationships. The apostles were stressed for sure. Absolutely. By the way, how much time has gone by between episodes 2 and 3 or between episodes 3 and 4? We don't know for sure. I was saying earlier it could have been 5 months.
Yeah.
In the context of the show, it doesn't seem like that long is supposed to have passed. Mainly because I believe we don't see this in the show. I'm pretty sure Eden's going to be pregnant, and we don't see her being pregnant yet. Yeah. And so I don't know. I could be wrong. I think she's probably supposed to be pregnant around this point. I don't know. Maybe she's going to be pregnant soon. I think that's going to be a plot line in the season. Yeah. So I think she's probably pregnant. She's not showing it though. So we're probably still in the early, like it's probably been like a month or 2.
Yeah.
So maybe their chronology is kind of off, but yeah. Seriously though, James's line about feeling like a fraud has been in my thoughts for a long time before this episode. I want to talk about that. Don't know how much we're gonna talk about it in this because once again, I don't want this live stream to be super duper long. But yeah. Sorry, gotta go. I'll rewatch your stream later. All right, no problem. Catch us later. Okay, now I've gone through all the live chat. Let's get back to the actual episode. Sound good?
Yep.
All right. Opening credits play. And after the opening credits, we cut to the sons of Zebedee, Simon the Zealot, and Thaddeus with Zebedee in the synagogue. And they're back, right? They have returned. Yep. They're in Capernaum. They hear this guy who's talking about the rituals and the different cleansing stuff from Leviticus. It's funny, all the different stuff that we've seen in synagogues, it's like they go out of their way to choose like the most boring passages. Yeah. Like they really know how to try to make the Torah seem really boring. Yeah. Not really, but the only other time that I can think of where we've seen people reading from the Torah was in season 2, episode like 6 or 7. It was the one where Jesus comes and he heals the guy with the withered hand. Yes. And they have the guy reciting about the stuff about the different people who are not allowed to be within the ranks of Israel, and like they're choosing like one of the like the hardest passages I think from Deuteronomy to like read. You're like, ooh, what does that mean? And it sounds pretty strict. And this one they're choosing like just cleansing rituals. Just kind of funny to me. But they're in the synagogue, and Zebedee looks over at John, and he's like, something's wrong, because typically y'all are like goofing off and like just acting up and doing a bunch of weird stuff, but you're actually paying attention. Yeah. And then John responds, and he's like, what, you're upset that I'm actually like paying attention in synagogue? And Zebedee's like, well, let's just say this guy's not going down in the history books. You know, it's not the most exciting thing. And then John gets on to him. How did you interpret, like, what were we supposed to take away from that scene? What do you think?
Yeah, you know, whenever we were watching it, I don't know if it's supposed to be like after they've gone out 2 by 2 and they've experienced these new things that it's like an eye-opening thing, and so maybe they're lost in thought, or maybe they're just taking that stuff not more seriously, but maybe it's just kind of a different perspective now that they've gone out and done these things, to where it's almost like a maturity moment kind of for them, because I mean, if we think about in scripture, we talk about how they are most likely like teenagers, and so that would be, I mean, if you go out and heal people and do these amazing miracles and you come back to your hometown, I would imagine that would be kind of a turning moment in your life that might be kind of a maturity thing. And so
that's kind of what I was getting out of it as well, especially with the character of John, because what they're doing with John, and I really like what they're doing, is that they have to get him from being the son of thunder to being the beloved apostle, right? So, and you really saw that transformation begin in season 2, episode 1, where, you know, you have Jesus, like he just like lashed out, like, oh yeah, like just saying stuff about the Samaritans. But then by the end of the episode, Jesus is preaching the sermon, like he's preaching out of Genesis 1, and John's like standing there just like tearing up. Yeah. And then at the beginning of this season, in episode 1, you have James and John walking, and James is like just worried about like all these other things, and John's like, have you not paid attention to the teachings we've been hearing? And like, you see him being shaped to where like he still has that anger and that zeal, and he's still imperfect and he's still fractured, but he's being impacted. And like, he's being like, I think that's what we're supposed to get out of it. Yeah. And in many ways, I think it's almost supposed to highlight that he has almost surpassed his father in devotion. You know, like like the father has become the son and the son the father, to quote Superman 1978. Gotta throw Superman in there. But that's kind of what I picked up from it, to where Zebedee's like over here, like Zebedee's the kid.
Yeah.
And he's been like, hey, come on, you gotta act up. This isn't even impressive. And John's like,
it's important.
Like John's fascinated by Leviticus, which I also am fascinated by Leviticus, but most people would not be fascinated by this stuff, you know? And so I think that's what you're supposed to get out of it.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And they hear a commotion outside and they just kind of keep listening. But Yusuf rushes out and he starts arguing with somebody. I forget who he's talking with. But they figure out that there's a dirty cistern, which we've already heard about this in the past, but it's becoming an increasingly prominent issue. There's a dirty cistern, and they learn that the tunnel is ruptured and that it's the sewage line. So this isn't just mud getting in the water. No. It is sewage, which is nasty. Like, that is absolutely gross.
I mean, like mixing together.
Well, that's the thing. The guy started gagging prior to them saying that, I believe. And I was like, well, it's just mud. I mean, like, that's just muddy water. Why would you gag at that? And they're like, no, it's sewage. I'm like, oh yeah, that's gag worthy for sure. 100%. Yeah, that's really gross. And then so Yusuf is arguing back and forth with this guy. It wasn't Gaius, right? He wasn't talking with Gaius there, was he?
No.
I'm trying to remember.
Are you talking about the 2 Roman people?
Yeah.
No,
okay.
That wasn't Gaius.
Yeah, a lot of the episode's kind of blending together right now. I'm going to rewatch it again like
I don't
later.
think that was Gaius.
Yeah.
I think
And so they're arguing back and forth, and Yusuf's saying, like, what's Rome going to do to fix the problem? And Rome's like, oh, we'll get to it whenever it's time, or like whenever we can like spend the money. And Quintus is not wanting to spend the money on it. And so Yusuf's like, okay, well, what do we need to do? And he says, well, if you want to get the materials together, you can do that. And Yusuf's like, okay, I'll do that. Because as we're going to see, Yusuf has got some money. And so, speaking of which, we cut to Yusuf approaching Jairus, who we haven't seen since episode 1? Yes. No, did we see him in episode 2? I think it was just in episode 1.
I think he was just in episode 1 with their conversation.
Yeah, and so he comes and approaches Jairus, and they said they haven't seen each other in a while. And Jairus mentions that he was actually looking for Yusuf as well, so this kind of works out. And Yusuf asks for parchment because he needs to write a letter back to Jerusalem. And Jairus assumes that this letter has to do with like Jesus and like wanting to write to Nicodemus or something like that. But Yusuf's like, no, I'm actually writing because we need materials to fix this cistern. And Jairus states that nobody told him about this dirty cistern, which is going to be important later because his daughter's going to get sick because they've been taking stuff from the cistern, and I guess nobody told him.
Yeah.
I don't know how they didn't realize it.
Yeah.
But he's new in town. I don't know. And so nobody told him about it. And then Yusuf explains that he has paid it in full. And he says that his family owns a stone quarry in Jerusalem, so he has a lot of money. And this goes once again back to something I talked about earlier, like back in episode 1, where it seems like they are making Yusuf out to be a specific character we know from Scripture. And I thought we had certain evidences of it back then. One involved him writing a letter to Nicodemus. But right here, and he also mentioned that he had a family in Jerusalem, right? And so they're just weaving it in there. But now we learn that Yusuf is rich and he has a stone quarry in Jerusalem. So now we know that this guy, his name is Yusuf, which is Hebrew for Joseph.
Yeah.
He has family in Jerusalem, but he's never said he's from Jerusalem. He says family in Jerusalem. They own a stone quarry and they're rich. This sounds very similar to a guy named Joseph of Arimathea who shows up in the Bible, right? Joseph of Arimathea, he was a secret believer of Jesus who never came out publicly, but who had followed Jesus for quite some time. But once Jesus dies, Joseph of Arimathea goes and he uses one of his family's stone-cut tombs, right? And he gives it to Jesus because he was a wealthy man living in Jerusalem, right? And so it seems like that's where they're taking the Yusuf character, which I'm excited about just because I like Yusuf a lot. And I think it's really cool just to see that interplay of the idea. I just think it's a very fascinating subject. The idea of somebody who is convicted of the truth, but is unwilling to step out and boldly proclaim it. Right?
Oh, we see that with multiple characters.
And we see, like, it's cool seeing the difference between Jairus and Yusuf, because Yusuf and Jairus, they believe the same thing, as we're going to see. But Jairus is recognizing that if I believe this, it changes everything.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't renounce it.
Yeah.
Whereas Yusuf, he is like, he's convicted of it.
Yeah.
And he knows it's true, but he's very hesitant. And he doesn't even want to say it out loud. And he's like in denial. And very interesting. And he's very much like Nicodemus in that way.
I was about to say that it reminds me of Nicodemus a lot.
Yeah. So really, really cool. So Yusuf explains Jairus explains why he wanted to see Yusuf, and he says that Shmuel and Shammai, which Shammai is a famous historical rabbi who was living around the time of Jesus, they are wanting more information about Jesus' sermon. And this leads forth into this whole debate about what exactly they should do and what they should tell them about the sermon. Jairus explains that he had read Yusuf's letter, and he asks if he stands by his words, and Yusuf explains, oh no, I was just emotional. His conclusions couldn't possibly be true. But then Jairus says, couldn't they though?
Yeah.
And I love that because you can see once again, like, it's just so, I love the characterization because Yusuf, you can, like, he believes it, but now that he's been confronted by it, and when we saw him in episode 1, he was kind of seeming to suggest that Jairus should read it because he was caught up in the moment. Yes. But now he's had time to reflect, and he's being confronted by it head on, and he's like, oh, no, it couldn't possibly be true. Yeah. But Jairus, on the other hand, is like, but no, couldn't it? Like, he's not even hesitant, and it's fascinating to see the interplay there. I love this, like, this whole interaction. Couldn't they be true? And then I love what Jairus says here. He says that he has been studying it deeply, right? And not only has he been studying the letter deeply, he's also been studying the Torah deeply, and he says that he has seen Jesus in the Torah, and that it was the religious dogma of that time period that has led people astray and caused them to reject Jesus. Yeah. That's like, great. Whoa. Because what Jairus is saying here, he's pointing out something that's very crucial. He's saying, okay, it's not simply the things Jesus is doing that's convincing him. He says, I've studied the scriptures, I see Jesus there. Yeah. And reading the scriptures in light of Jesus is highlighting some of the spiritual blind places that the people were recognizing. It's specifically the idea of the Messiah being a warrior, a conquering king. Yeah. Because if you look in the scriptures, you'll never find one explicit verse that says that the Messiah is going to be that way. I will admit that it's very easy to read it that way, especially in light of all the promises that God has planned in the scope of eternity. But there's never a place that explicitly says that. That's just something where people are kind of being, like, you could see how that would arise, especially given the needs of the people in Israel. And like, if they're thinking, how would this possibly happen? They're probably thinking conquering king. But it never explicitly says that. And so Jairus, he's kind of being a Berean, which if you know what a Berean is, go to the book of Acts. It's a person who studies stuff to see if it's true. Yeah. He's not just basing off experience. He's studying the scriptures, and he sa's, I see Jesus there. Yeah.
He's validating his beliefs.
Yes, which is cool. I loved it. Mwah, beautiful. What do you think about that? Sorry, I've been talking a lot. I need to give you a chance to talk.
I really liked it. It's cool to see how passionate he is about it too. Like, you can tell that. I mean, it's just good acting, but it seems like whenever you're watching it, it's very believable. Like it just seems like it's just like he has this, like, all this information, like, pent up inside, and it's just like pouring out of him as he's talking. He's like, finally, I get to tell you about all the stuff I've been studying, and so it's really cool. I like it.
Yeah, so, no, it was fun. I really like this interaction because I didn't know what to think of Jairus when we saw him in episode 1.
Me neither.
Yeah, I didn't know where they
couldn't figure out, like, are you suspicious? Like, should I trust you yet? I don't know.
Yeah, but now I'm Team Jairus, 100%. Like, this is great. And the one thing that he's not willing to explicitly state, though, is that he's saying, okay, he's got to be more than a rabbi, and he's saying, but he couldn't possibly be. And he's not willing to say it, but you know what's on his mind, because it seems like he's coming to the conclusion. I could be wrong here. Yeah. There's two options really. He could be thinking Messiah.
That's what I was.
But I think that if he was going to think Messiah, he wouldn't mind just saying it, right? He couldn't be the Messiah. To me, it seems like Jairus has come to the higher conclusion that Jesus is God. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why he's like, he couldn't possibly be. And this is where Yusuf kind of silences him. He's like just let's stop there. Yeah. And Jairus says that he knows the consequences of his letters, and he knows, like, the consequences of what he's suggesting here. Right. And this is where Yusuf's like, yeah, we should probably need to calm down with some of this talk. Yusuf admits that he does believe it, though, because Jairus kind of pushes him back. He's like, so you saying you don't believe it? But he says, no, I do. And he doesn't, like, say it. He just nods. Yeah. And he says, and Nicodemus? And Yusuf says, yeah, he just nods. Like, he's not explicitly saying it, but he can't deny the fact that, he does believe it. Which I would think it's kind of reassuring being surrounded by somebody like Jairus, where, like, this dude's just unafraid. Like, to me, that would encourage your faith. Yeah. Other than the fact that you might be concerned because Jairus is a bit reckless with it, but maybe, I don't know. They agree that one thing they do agree on, though, is that the Sanhedrin does not need to know anything about the sermon. Right. And so I guess, like, I might have missed this because I was taking notes during all this, obviously. They said they were going to falsify the account, right?
I think so.
So they said they were just going to, like, put stuff to kind of just, like, send them in a different direction, I guess. Which is interesting. because then you can talk about like the moral like questionability of that. Like, are they doing that to protect Jesus or to protect themselves, or just because they think that it's the right thing to do? I don't know. I don't know. There's questions there. Okay, then we cut to Simon coming back home. And I kind of like this. He's coming in there to surprise Eden. You know, he's trying to pull a fast one on her. He sneaks up behind her. She actually reacted way better than I would have expected.
Yeah,
I thought she was gonna turn around, like punch him or something and push him. Yeah. So he comes home, and I gotta admit here, I related a lot more to Simon in this scene than I liked. Because as I was watching it, I was like I could see Eden's frustration. And I was like, Eden, come on. I mean, give the guy a break. He's you don't understand what this guy's gone through. But then about halfway through the scene, I was like, I think I'm supposed to side with Eden. Oh no, am I Simon? And I had to look over at Brienne, and I was like, I'm so sorry. Because yeah, I get it from both angles, and I think you're supposed to. I think the issue, the beauty of the show is that this isn't just a staged drama. I mean, it is stage drama, but we've been watching Smallville lately, right? We've been watching Smallville, and that's a show about Superman. And most of the drama in that show, it wouldn't happen in real life. It is just just have a conversation, or it's just because the people are just so extreme and weird, and it's just soap opera-ish sometimes. Still my favorite show.
Mind you, it's a show with superheroes.
Yes. So but in this show, I can 100% see this conversation happening because you understand both perspectives.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you that there are many men who were right with me, and they're like, I totally get where Simon's coming from. And there are many women over there being like, I totally get where Eden's coming from. And then both sides were thinking, why can't the other person just see from their perspective?
Exactly.
That's how you know it's a good scene, because that's how I felt. And I was watching it, and I was like, oh gosh, it's terrible watching it from another angle, because I see Simon, and I'm like, hey, Eden, you got to understand where he's coming from. But the thing is, she's been doing work the whole time too.
Yeah.
That's one place where maybe I kind of because sometimes I see people taking Eden's perspective, but they haven't done diddly squat. You know what I mean? You got this one person who's been working their tail off, and they come home and they're exhausted. Then there's other person who's been waiting around all day. They're like, you don't want to socialize for hours? It's like, well, no, I've been exhausted. Yeah. Eden, to be fair, she's been working her butt off too. And so they're both exhausted, but she's wanting to make time. I was like, okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
But he comes home. First off, he doesn't notice anything around the house, which this is something that I will just side with him on forever. I have no apologies for this. Decorations around the house, I could genuinely care less about. I couldn't care less about. I genuinely, that stuff I don't really notice that much. Yeah. I do feel bad because some people do really care about it, and I do want to take the effort to notice those things. But Simon comes home and he's like, I didn't notice that table was a foot over, and that is something that I would 100% do. But once again, you do want to take notice of it because the person doing it put their heart into it and it was meaningful to them. So you want to try to take notice of that stuff. Yeah. But speaking from, I don't know if this is speaking on behalf of all men, I personally usually do not care about that stuff. I like making this look good, but other than that, it doesn't matter to me. As long as everything works, we're good to go. Yeah. So he doesn't notice the tapestry on the wall. He doesn't know the table being scooted over a foot or two, but she expects him to, and she's annoyed that he didn't see it. And I will just say, I think from both perspectives here, they're both in the wrong because they're both turned inwards. Yeah. Right. I think in the context of the show, you're supposed to be more on Eden's side, but I think that they're both in the wrong because they're both totally self-focused. Yeah. Because there are moments where they're both selfless, but broadly speaking, they're both focused inwards. Right. She suggests he takes a nap, and then she seems upset whenever he says he's going to do it. Which, once again, from Simon's perspective, I'm like, I've seen part of this scene in the behind the scenes somewhere or something like that, where they're getting an argument. I guess it's from the next episode where she's lashing out at him. And he's like, you told me to take a nap, so I took a nap. And she's going to bring that up to him. Whereas to me, I'm just going to tell you right now, I agree with Simon. Don't say something unless you mean it. Yeah. If you tell me to take a nap, I'm going to go take a nap. Because the thing is, because if you want to talk about something, just tell me. Don't play those mental games with me. If I'm tired, I'm probably not going to be reading things metaphorically or, I'm not going to be picking up on the hints you're throwing down. Tell me literally what you want me to do. And I'll do it. Does that mean I'm right? No, 100%. Should he be more perceptive of stuff? Absolutely. He should know his wife and he should be thinking about that. But I'm just saying, don't tell him to go take a nap unless you're fine with that. You know, that's just a general rule. And I hold myself to the same thing. Don't tell somebody like they have options of doing stuff unless you're fine with them choosing both options.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But she gets upset about that. And then this is where he takes a step too far, I think. He's like, hey, honey, by the way, the boys are coming over tomorrow. So could you make some more food?
Yeah.
That's where I was like, okay,
As
Simon.
he's eating all the food.
Yeah. He's like, oh, yeah, this food's going to be gone by tomorrow. Could you make some more? That's where I was like, Simon, okay. That was probably, you went a little too far there.
Yeah.
That's where I was like, okay, yeah. But to Eden's credit, this is where she actually handles it probably the best. Where she's like, yeah, I'll make food. Yeah. But even then, it's like she's being selfless, but also internally you can tell she's not being selfless.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can tell this is going to come bite him in the butt.
Oh, yeah.
Which...
She's going to hold it in for a little while, hold a grudge a little bit.
Yeah. And which, once again, just not healthy. But this is the issue that they're facing here. They're not getting any alone time to talk about stuff.
Yeah.
Right? That's the issue. Because, like, it's literally the busyness of life that's keeping them from actually mending this. To where literally the only times that he gets to, like, talk to her is, like, there's people there. And he's like, hey, can we talk about this? And she's like, now's not the time. It's like, yeah. And then, like, at nighttime, they're just, like, laying down in bed quiet. It's a mess. It's a mess. But I get totally both perspectives. But moving on. Eden, later on, she's taking her clothes out, right? Or she's going to get water first. The first time, yeah, she's going to get water. And she encounters a woman from Caesarea Philippi, and this woman's name is Veronica, which I don't know. I didn't know the name Veronica was that old. I don't know. We'll have to look it up. But Veronica shows up, and Veronica, they have an interaction. Veronica's kind of a little bit awkward, I would say.
Yeah.
Just because it seems like she doesn't. Well, yeah, just nervous because like as we'll see, she's been rejected by a lot of people, and so I think she's just kind of awkward in interactions because she's kind of always anticipating that moment when people push her away. Yeah. It's like psychoanalyzing this character I've seen in just a few scenes. Yeah, and Veronica eventually says, hey, I found the secret spring, which that was actually interesting to me. I mean, this is not a big deal whatsoever, but I was just thinking, okay, Eden has lived in Capernaum for who knows how long.
Longer than her.
Veronica is just visiting as a pilgrim, yet Veronica knows like a secret place more than Eden. That was kind of surprising to me.
She passed by, like I guess maybe whenever she was traveling there or something, but yeah, that is kind of weird. Yeah.
Like, and I guess it makes more sense because Eden would have never had any reason to wander on her own because, you know, she's like a normal in that society, right? And so she would only have to go to the normal places, whereas Veronica, even though how short she was there, she would be constantly seeking out a place to be alone. Yeah. Look at that. I fixed it for myself. Never mind. It's not a problem anymore. So they go to this secret spring, and then we cut away to Jairus with his family, where we get to meet his 12-year-old daughter, Neely, and she's helping her mom cook, but eventually Neely collapses. Yeah. And is like, oh no, what's going to happen? Not good. I think we know what's going to happen. Yeah. And she's carried to the bed. And unfortunately for Neely, I don't think she's going to come out of that bed alive. Yet. Yeah. Yet. She is, I think she's going to die. Yeah. Actually, I think she did. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that she's probably really close to death. I don't know. Because like whenever you read the gospel accounts, it says like that they approach Jesus and say like my daughter is dying. But by the way that the mom yelled at the end of the episode, it seems like she's dead.
That's what I was thinking.
So we'll see. We'll see how they do that, but we'll have to wait a week and find out. We got back, and now Eden and Veronica are once again they're at the spring. They've arrived there. Yeah. And this is where they just kind of have a back and forth. Nothing really too significant. But then the main thing is that Eden sees Veronica's clothing. Yeah. And she notices that it's stained with blood. And this is where you probably know where the story's heading because you're like, oh, this is the woman discharge of blood. Yes. It's not explained quite yet, but she sees it. Yeah. And you're like, oh, okay, I know.
And she says it's been 12 years.
Yeah. Well, I think that's in the next scene. I think it's like, yeah, because they go back to it later. And that's where like, because I don't think she was comfortable enough with her yet to ask. But later on, they go back to that same spring and they, but it will be 12 years, which is the same age as Jairus' daughter. Interestingly enough. Okay, then we cut to the women in Matthew's house, which this was also interesting to me, mainly because, once again, in the context of the episode, it doesn't make as much sense. I'm just more looking at like the chronology of the show. They've been staying in this house for months at this point. Yeah. But it seems like this is almost their first time going in there because Tamar is like
analyzing.
Yeah, this is just one of those places where, once again, it doesn't take away from the show. It's just like stuff where I'm just like trying to figure out like how much time has passed, how long is this? Yeah. I don't know. Just because it seemed like it was almost their first time walking through there because Tamar's like, oh, you know, like, I'm so glad that Matthew's allowing us to stay here, but now let's talk about his furniture. And it's almost like they've never had this conversation before. Yeah. which there's ways to explain that away, but it was just kind of interesting to me that they had that. But this is probably one of my favorite scenes from the whole episode because I just like the tension. Yeah. It's just the drama. Tamar is very critical of all the stuff here, and you can tell she's kind of snobbish with it.
Yeah.
And she's criticizing like just like the furniture and the colors and stuff, and probably, if I'm being honest, probably not stuff that people back in the day would have been as having a big problem with, because it was more of a modern problem, because nowadays we have this mentality of like progression where it's like, you know, if my grandpa had it, it's way out of date. Whereas back in like, you know, ancient cultures, like it would have been like, hey, if it worked for my grandpa, it works for me.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't really as much this idea of like technological development as quickly back then, where she's talking about like, oh yeah, that stuff would have been nice like 5 years ago.
Well, and as we see later, she talks about how like heirlooms and stuff like that are very valuable in their culture and stuff. So like stuff that's passed down or things that are older, like there's value in that. Yeah. And so I don't know, some of the stuff I think it was just more critiquing us nowadays, which I'm totally fine with. Like that doesn't bother me. I was just kind of a lot of stuff I do on this channel is to highlight the differences between like the historical reality and like modern stuff. And so I think that was more commentary on us nowadays, because how many of us God-fearing Christian folk do the same thing, where we'll just look and be like, that's so out of date. And sometimes it takes you looking at a person in the first century to look at that to be like, well, that's really shallow. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really shallow. That's me. So I think that's more why they do that there. Tamar explains, this is whenever she's like, oh, let's just sell all of Matthew's stuff. And Mary Magdalene's like it's like, that's kind of weird. It's like, hey, so what about like, remember how we talked about maybe you selling some of your stuff? Yeah. Which I think is a fair point, because it's like, hey, you're willing to sell all of this dude's stuff. Raina and Mary have given up their stuff. And so that is a fair point.
Yeah, no, they've left everything to follow Jesus. Yeah. And that's something that they talked about earlier on in the season, where they're like, hey, you haven't left really anything. I mean, you've left stuff, but not your possessions. Yeah. Like, come on. And you're just over here wanting to sell all of Matthew's stuff. And it's just definitely like elephant in the room for sure. And then this is where Tamar's like, no, my ancestors live in these beads. Yeah. And she starts saying some stuff. And I'm glad they addressed this, because the way she was describing it, I was like, you know, I can't tell if they're trying to like, if this is supposed to be like a legitimate defense or if it's supposed to be bad, because it sounded kind of pagan. And then Mary Magdalene's like, well, that sounds kind of pagan. I was like, oh, okay. Well, there you go. Yeah, it's like, because there are some Christians who I genuinely have heard say stuff like this. But nowadays it's more like a new agey concept. And I've heard people say that. I'm like, that doesn't jive. Yeah. So I like that they did that, because they took a stance. Whereas there's so many people, like a lot of Christians were like, they just kind of spiritualize stuff. And I'm like, that's not biblical. That's like a weird, like, you're picking that up from some like other religion and stuff. Yeah. It's like not biblical at all. Yeah. And I'm glad they took a hard stance there, where they're like, yeah, that sounds like pagan animism. Like and Tamar's like, no, it's not. It's not. And I'm like, no, it is. Like, so I like that they just did that. Like, I like they're introducing this conflict, because there really is a lot of ways to apply that nowadays, and it should teach you like that's the benefit of this show, right? Once again, some of the best stuff from the show is not even explicitly the biblical stuff. It's how they're using biblical characters to help shine lights on present issues, which I think is really well done. Especially that's why I like the scene so much. So they start debating about stuff, and they go more in depth, and you know, like they start bantering back and forth, and she's like, Tamar's like, well, you have a background too, and Mary's like, yeah, I do, and Tamar's like, yeah, well, I've heard about stuff. And I think the implication there is more of an accusation about like Mary's reputation as possibly being a prostitute, which in the show they have clarified she was not a prostitute, but everybody thinks she was, because she hung out in the Red Quarter. And I think that's kind of what they're implying, to where Tamar was saying something more biting, and Mary Magdalene looks at her, but she doesn't correct her or anything. She's just like, I have had a past. Yeah. And they just move on, you know? And so I thought that was handled well. Then Zebedee, of course, like every time an argument breaks out, somebody knocks on the door to interrupt it in this scene, episode. Zebedee shows up and asks for a chat, and this is another thing that confused me chronologically speaking. Right? So I think that's one issue with this episode, is I'm trying to figure out, when did things take place? Right. Because he shows up and he says, hey, I want you to try my first batch of olive oil. Right. But we had a scene almost exactly like this in episode 2. Yeah. And this was episode 2, and Thomas was there, and he says, hey, I want you to try my first batch of olive oil. Yeah. So I'm like, they're both called the first batch. Yeah. And they're both olive oil.
maybe it's like the only thing that I thought whenever I heard that, because I thought that was kind of weird too. But I was thinking that he gave his sons the first batch, as in like first batch that he's ever made before. But now they've made the decision. Once they went 2 by 2, and they're like, the women are going to stay back in Matthew's house, and they're going to help Zebedee with his olive oil business. This is like his first batch that he could sell.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that I could think of is like, this is not my first batch I've ever made. This is my first batch that I can put out to sell to people. Or like, this is maybe it's a different formula. Or so it's like, okay, this is my first like recipe. What do y'all think? Because this is what I would like use to sell.
Yeah. But it's also just interesting to me because like in the other one, it was like the olive oil was good. And
that's why I'm thinking a new formula.
To me, part of me was wondering like if they reshuffled the storylines or something, because I know that the actress who plays Rayma, she wasn't in this episode.
Yes.
And that's because she had like scheduling conflicts with another TV show.
Yeah.
And she had to leave for a while. I'm wondering if maybe, and this is just me totally guessing, maybe the Thomas and Rayma storyline was going to be like later on in the show. And they had filmed that scene later on. So like maybe the olive oil thing was, this is just me totally guessing. I have no idea. Maybe the olive oil thing was later on, and like the olive oil with Thomas was later on. And then Thomas asks about Rayma and like pursuing her. And maybe that was going to be a plot point for later on in the season. But then whenever the actress announced she couldn't leave, maybe they had to like bump that forward in order to explain why she wasn't there. And so they get established, oh yeah, she's going off to like figure out this stuff with Thomas and everything. And that could explain why she's gone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Also, we never heard anything about Thomas, and like
we didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Interesting. I don't know. But there's just some stuff like chronologically speaking, I'm confused about the olive oil thing, and maybe I'm just looking too far into it. Yeah. It was just to me, it's just like when it comes to immersing yourself in the show.
Yeah.
I think this is the first time I've had an issue with that. Is in this episode where I was just like, I don't know when things are taking place, and that was kind of confusing me a bit. But then as they're discussing olives, so they say it's bad, but then Tamar starts talking about, oh, well, maybe we can get you another place. And she immediately starts proposing this like business venture. And it seems like her big issue is going to be greed in a way, because she's just all about like making money and like, let's just take all of the money that we were given and like, just go have this business venture that's not guaranteed to have any return. And that's fine. But Mary Magdalene's wisely like, that needs to go to Judas. And that's the second time in this episode, like just in this scene where she's like, let's go to Judas about that. Like Judas is the one with the money. We need to talk to him about it. We can't just go do that. And Tamar's kind of like, why? It seems kind of impulsive. It's just very I'm interested to see where they go with Tamar's character. That's all I'm gonna say. And then we're going to come check out y'all's live chats in a second, because there are so many there. I just wanted to get through more of this before we went and checked that. But now we get the apostles gathered once again, and they're at Simon's house. A very similar scene to what we saw in episode 2, but now Jesus isn't there. And now they're just kind of gathered around to talk about their adventures in their their mission. There you go. And Eden throughout this scene seems kind of snappy. Which culturally speaking, I would be very surprised if a woman spoke this bluntly in front of men, and if so, she'd probably have a talking to. But I like Eden's character enough, so I'll allow it. But yeah, so she seemed very snappy in the scene, and once again, I mean, everybody loses control a little bit, but it's like there are some times where I was like, oh my gosh, like whoa, like calm down, like everybody's feeling the tension.
Oh yeah, they do.
But once again, it's been building up inside of her. And she's not the only one frustrated here. You would think that everybody's super duper excited about all that's happened. And it seemed like, once again, they were excited in the moment, right? In the black and white scenes, they were also thrilled. And you didn't really see any frustrations. But now that they're back and now that they're reflecting on it, they're seeming more frustrated than anything. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I didn't have time. I was trying to focus on the scene, so I didn't write down every single person who was frustrated. But the most vocal one for sure is Big James. And Big James, he just talks about one aspect of that, like them going out there and spreading Jesus' name, is that there's going to be more scrutiny coming their way and more pushback. And he doesn't like that, which is interesting because Jesus told them that was going to happen. But basically the idea is that the apostles are not necessarily aligned with Jesus. And they're saying, we just don't agree. And John brings up the whole idea of like James's jealousy, which they didn't really pay off or anything. They just have like John pointing out that him and James have talked about it and how James feels kind of left out because John and Thomas are hanging out so much. And James is like, I'm not even like, that doesn't even bother me anymore, which is like, you can see in his eyes, it definitely still bothers him.
Yeah.
But what does bother him is the fact that Jesus sent them out and he gave them power, but no understanding.
Yeah.
Which I just thought was an interesting plot. Like, I just like a plot line that like an interesting concern to have.
Yeah.
Not one that I'd really thought of them having, but what did you think about that whole discussion about wisdom and power but no understanding?
Yeah, that's something that I never really thought of either. But I mean, I was trying to put myself in their shoes in that situation, trying to think, okay, if I was like sent out 2 by 2 and you were like performing these miracles, which are just crazy, and you're obviously not doing that with your own human power, like what would you be thinking? And I guess, I mean, it is a question that I could see arising. Like, I'm doing all these things and I know, like, Jesus has prompted me to go and do this, but like, I don't understand why I'm doing this or necessarily the purpose of it. I'm just told I need to go and do this. And so I'm following his commands. And so I could see how that would be a question. I think it's just one I've never really thought of.
Yeah. I guess I'm still just trying to understand exactly fully what they were implying by with the power but no understanding thing.
Yeah.
The thing that I did understand for sure, and I resonated with, especially as somebody who like does ministry stuff, when he said that he felt like a fraud for preaching what isn't practiced, that I just got, because I mean, that's the difficult thing. You're out there, like, I mean, I have to do this. I'm a Bible teacher, right? I teach like Monday through Friday, teaching these kids stuff. And there are times where I am teaching them stuff and I'm getting convicted myself. And I'm like, but I'm just honest with them. I'm like, guys, I'm going to totally be straightforward with you. I have not perfected this. And I probably never will on this side of heaven. But so it does make you feel like a fraud a little bit, because you're over here like proclaiming like, this is what we're supposed to do. And we're supposed to live for Jesus. And we're supposed to live for his glory and like all this amazing stuff.
Yeah.
But inside you're just like aware of how sinful you are. And as you grow in your relationship with God, you also grow in your awareness of your sinfulness. And so this is something that is like, the more I serve God and the more that I talk about him and the more I teach about him, the more like a fraud I feel sometimes. So I totally got that. But they were using that as like an argument for why they shouldn't do it almost. Which to me is interesting, because I've seen that argument lobbied against Christians before. Like, I've seen where like atheists or people who just aren't Christians, like they've said like, oh, well, how can you preach that whenever you haven't perfected it? I've never fully understood that mentality that much, because to me, it's like, well, just admit that you're not perfect. Like, because the only issue with you teaching it is like, well, yeah, like just admit you're not perfect. It's the same reason why like Jesus or Paul can teach about marriage whenever they haven't been married. You don't have to experience the reality of something in order to know the truth of it. You just have to know what's true, right? And so, like, I don't have a problem teaching people about righteousness and holiness and godliness whenever I myself am a wicked and unholy and ungodly person who's just trying to live for Christ more, right? I have no problem with that, because I just preface it by saying, hey, guys, I'm not perfect. So that doesn't bother me, because it's not based on my experience. It's based on what's true. But I have seen people argue that against Christians, so maybe that they're addressing that. And I think there probably are Christians who do struggle with that. Like, how can I preach this whenever I myself am imperfect? And there is, I guess, some biblical precedent for that question, because I mean, in order to be a teacher or a leader in the church, you're supposed to be, above reproach. And so you have to hold yourself to a standard, which doesn't mean perfect, but it means people shouldn't be able to just like be like, hey, you're filled with sin. And so I don't know. I just thought that was a very interesting dynamic, and and I love that they're talking about it without Jesus there. Because this allows Eden. So even though Eden's going through all this stuff, it's kind of funny. It's almost like her anger and her agitation causes her to just be more logical, which I think sometimes it does. Like, this sometimes, like, anger and agitation typically is not necessarily the most pure and righteous thing. But a lot of the times, what it will do is whenever a bunch of people are bickering around you and you're angry, agitated, and annoyed, it'll make you realize how pointless their argument is. And so Eden just steps up there. And she's just like, why don't you just ask Jesus when you see him next time? And they're just like, oh. And Matthew's like, and Matthew just, that is a good point. He's like, I agree. Because Matthew really hadn't said much throughout all that, but he's just like,
he was like, I like that one.
He's like, no, that was good. Yeah. I mean, that's a valid point. Like, because there was no solution, right? Like, they were just whining and complaining, which so often we as Christians do. And it's like, just ask Jesus, right? Or like, sometimes you see Christians doing this, like there's debating. It's like, just go look in the scriptures, right? Just like pray about it. I don't know, like
ask for wisdom.
Do something proactive. Don't just whine and complain. And so I love that, because Eden was annoyed, and she herself is not in a good mental state. But I've been there. I've been there where I'm annoyed with something and like somebody will just do something. I'm like, guys, you're making this way too complicated. Like, here's the solution. And they're just like, huh, yeah. And maybe my heart wasn't in the right place whenever I said it, but it made a good point. So that's what Eden did there.
Yeah.
And Simon also rebukes them. And he gets onto them and he's like, hey, my wife opened up to, like, you know, stop, like, my wife opened up her house to y'all. And it shows that he is mindful and he's aware of what she's doing.
Yeah.
But, like, from her perspective, he's still not doing enough. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I understand both perspectives.
Yeah.
Because it's not that he's totally blind to what she's doing.
Yeah, right.
It's that she feels that he's blind to what he's doing. You know, like, that's the difference.
Well, I think it's probably because, like, the thing that she's looking for is like the one thing that he's not doing. So it feels like he's doing absolutely nothing because there's like one specific thing that's not being fulfilled that she's, or like, you know what I mean?
Well, and I think it's also just they're both turning inward once again. Like, because both of them really have the same issue. Both of them have been working their butts off in different ways. And both of them are so focused on all the stuff they've been doing that they're failing to appreciate all the work the other one has been doing. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like Simon, he's been off doing this other stuff and he's caught up in like all the Jesus stuff and trying to figure it all out. And by the end, he's just exhausted from it because of all the trouble it's caused him. But that has caused him to like come home and he's just consumed with ministry stuff. And he's just not focused. Like, he's like, he's not focused on like whether the table's moved over a little bit, but he is aware like that it's not easy on his wife to have everybody over constantly. And he wants alone time with her too. And he wants to talk with her. And so he recognizes that she's doing things, but he isn't vocalizing it or addressing it in the same way she would want. Yeah. But she's also doing the same thing, right? Where it's like she's so focused on all this stuff that she's really not taking the time to realize that this dude was literally out here like putting his life on the line, preaching about Jesus for months possibly, and like doing this crazy, amazing stuff that would result in you having like this like fervor and excitement and just wanting to be around everybody and like talking about like what happened. And like, so both of them are failing to understand the other person's perspective. It's just a real like conflict. Like I could totally see this happening. But Andrew notices that something's wrong here. It's not too hard to notice. But I just, what did you think about Andrew's reaction to this?
You could tell that he wasn't quite sure, I guess, what the issue was, and you could tell he didn't pick a side either. Yeah, like he wasn't like, oh yeah, Simon's definitely in the wrong and Eden's right, or like, oh, Eden's definitely in the wrong, like Simon, like, you know, like what'd she do or something. You could tell that he was very confused as to what was going on, and you could see genuine concern as to what was going on. And so it was kind of sweet. I thought it was a sweet moment.
Well, I did too, because
he was very perceptive of what was going on.
Yeah, part of me it just made me want to know like what all did Andrew go through? Yeah. Because maybe like it's something just so subtle because we saw Andrew getting rejected, right? And we know in past scenes and past episodes and past seasons, really, Andrew's been dealing a lot with like just like anxiety and like worried about John the Baptist. But now he himself has endured some of that rejection. Yeah. And so it makes me wonder if maybe it's kind of handled some of the anxiety stuff to where rather than focusing inwards and like freaking out about stuff,
he's looking around.
It's almost like a healthy form of anxiety. Yeah. Like the anxiety that Paul talked about when he's like, I'm anxious for the churches, right? Where it's like he's almost like that's kind of what I picked up from it, where like he wasn't like looking like a brother who's just like trying to butt in on somebody's business. He's just like, what's going on? Like, like he was
genuinely concerned.
Yeah, like and like he was just like looking at both of them like, hey, like what's happening here? And I'm interested to see if they follow up with that or if that was just like a brief scene. But I don't know. I really like that scene.
That was
I
a
like
very
that part
sweet
too.
moment. I liked it.
And then we cut to Zebedee, and this was probably the most random scene of the episode to me.
So too.
To me, it almost seemed like they were just wanting to show off part of the new set. I don't know. But it was Zebedee selling his boat. I think it also shows that Zebedee is also giving stuff up for Jesus. I think that's probably what it's emphasizing. But he's selling his boat. And he's apparently totally leaving the fishing business, which I wasn't expecting. Yeah. I figured he would stay in the fishing business and he was doing the olive oil thing on the side. But I guess he is just all in on this olive oil thing, which makes me concerned because I'm like, I wonder if they're setting this up for like a failure to where it's like, you know, just further drama later on because they're just kind of going all in. I don't know. But
olive oil's not going too good right now.
Yeah. But one thing, one good line that came from this, and I wouldn't be surprised if they wrote the entire scene just for this line, is whenever the guy was talking to him, I don't know if we'll get the guy's name. But the guy says, he says, you own nothing under Rome, right? And then Zebedee says, I own nothing above Rome either. Like it's just like a joke, but it's the idea of like everything I have belongs to God, and like Rome is just nothing. You know, like this dude was focusing on like how Rome is just like oppressing them, and he's like,
not a concern.
It's not really a concern. Yeah, I just really like that. Then we cut back to Eden and Veronica once again, and this is the scene we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, now
where
they're washing clothes.
They're back there once again. I think Veronica's already washing the clothes, and then Eden walks up. It's like, oh, and this time Eden, instead of getting water, she is washing clothes as well. Which I was gonna say, like, I probably wouldn't want to be getting water from that spring.
That's
if the
what
girl,
I was thinking.
Yeah,
I was thinking that. Well, especially because like she was further downstream.
Yeah,
then, like you would think, let me go on this side of Veronica because then my water is going downstream into hers.
Yeah, like
I thought about that.
I thought about when we were watching it because I was like, okay, like first off, Eden didn't know at first. Sorry, this is going back to the scene earlier, but like Eden is downstream from Veronica. Yeah. And to be fair to Eden, she didn't know that Veronica like had that dirty clothes at first.
Right.
But like, come on, Veronica. Like Veronica, like, hey, like just go to the other side. Yeah. Just because you're washing like your clothes, and that's kind of nasty. And this girl's trying to get clean water, and you said you were giving her clean water.
Yeah.
And you're giving her not clean water.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was just the thing. Yeah. But this time she's coming back and she's not getting water. This time she's actually coming to wash the clothes.
Yes.
Which I guess maybe. Like, I guess she just knew this spring was there now, and I guess that's where she was washing the clothes, and I guess she didn't tell anybody else about the clothes. Yeah. But she goes there, and she eventually asks Veronica, like, what brought her here, and Veronica says, I came here to hear the preacher. She's talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
Presumably, I don't know. Could be some other random preacher, but I think it's Jesus. And Eden voices how she's kind of aware of, you know, like, she doesn't explicitly state anything, but she kind of hints at the idea of that there's struggles following Jesus. She doesn't explicitly say Jesus' name or anything, but she's like, yeah. She says something along the lines of, like, that was back then or something like that. That was a long time ago. It made me think of a song that I wrote a long time ago called The Rooster Crows. It's about Peter. It's from Peter's perspective, and it's about that moment whenever Peter's, you know, being confronted by everybody and like being like, oh, are you Jesus? Like, are you a follower of Jesus? And the whole, like, the song is talking about like, oh, I've seen like dead men like open their eyes and breathe, and I've seen blind men open their eyes. But it's just about all the things that Peter's experienced. I've walked on water, and I've had him pull me from the depths, all this stuff. But then at the end of each verse it says, but then things changed. Right? And so at the end of each verse is just saying, well, that was then, this is now. And Eden's kind of going through that same thing. Like, yeah, following Jesus sounded really good back then because I felt like I was getting my husband back, but now everything's falling apart and it's hard. And I kind of like that they're addressing that.
Yeah.
She voiced her struggle following Jesus. Veronica explains her disease. This is where she says that she has been bleeding for 12 years. He was like, you mean 12 days? She's like, no, honey, 12 years. I know what I said. And this is where Eden's like, oh, that is terrifying. Yeah. And Veronica gives a specific name to the disease. I don't know what it was called. I'd have to. I'll go rewatch it and I'll figure out what it was. She
just said it was a rare disease.
Oh, maybe.
I thought she said it's a rare disease.
Oh, maybe because I thought she said like a name, and I was like, would they have had names back then? Like,
I think she just said it's a rare disease because Eden was surprised.
Okay, because I thought she said like it's something disease. I was like,
no, because Eden was like, how is that even possible? And then she said it's a rare disease.
Okay.
Yeah, gotcha. She's like, how are you still alive? Yeah.
But then they eventually go on and they move and they talk about. She's like, Eden says, that's why you're unmarried. And she says, I'm on anything. Yeah. And you can tell a little bit of bitterness there, which rightfully so. I mean, she's, well, not rightfully so. You're never rightfully bitter, I don't think. But she's understandably frustrated, right? Understandably so, I guess. Eden assures her, so she's like, oh, yeah, I don't have a husband and I don't get to enjoy the touch of my husband like you do. And Eden's like, oh, believe me, honey, I have not been enjoying the touch of my husband. And that was kind of mean. Yeah. I mean, I understand. Like, the idea is that, like, you know, her and Simon haven't been very intimate. But, like, poor Eden. Like, come on, give Simon a break. I mean, I understand both perspectives. And I take Eden's side a little bit more than Simon's. Mainly because I see myself more in Simon. And the things that I see in Simon are things that I see in my... Like I recognize that I need to change. So, I take Eden's side. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm like, girl, give that dude a break.
Well, so, especially saying it to like someone else that you don't know. I was like, wow, I'm surprised.
Well, this is how gossip starts.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this is this is stuff that you see at the hair salon. You know, it's like, oh yeah, my husband doesn't touch me at all. And then like Veronica's gonna go over here and be like, oh, I know how to get in the good favor with everybody else. Did you know that Simon and Eden, they were having marital struggle? You know, like I can just see this going on. Like Veronica's not gonna do this, but I was kind of like, maybe this isn't probably the most appropriate joke. But once again, I don't think Eden is supposed to be somebody that we're like looking at as like the idyllic.
Well, she's not perfect.
She's not perfect.
Yeah,
I think that's the hard part, is because in past seasons, she has
say,
been so almost
it's always
perfect.
been just Simon's fault, but
yeah,
I think it's good that now we see faults on both sides.
Yeah, it's still Simon's fault, but
yeah.
it's also Eden's fault.
Well, yeah, it's not like. Okay.
Maybe one day we'll get Simon actually to accept the right. That'll probably come in the sequel series based on Acts. Finally, he'll do something right or something. Yeah, but let's see. Let me see. So Veronica's Eden says that, oh, I'm sorry that you have like no hope or something. And Veronica's like, well, the doctors have failed, but that doesn't mean I'm without hope. There could be something that I still haven't tried. And you don't know if she has you don't know if she has something in mind yet, or if she is just an optimist. But I'm thinking she has something in mind.
I think so.
Because there's a reason she traveled from Caesarea Philippi, and I don't think it was just to hear Jesus. No. I think it's because she wants to touch his robe.
Yep.
But we'll get to that next episode. We move on, and now we have Jairus and Yusuf once again talking with one another, and Yusuf explains more in depth the problem that's going on with the water, and just explains what they're going to do to kind of salvage that problem and fix it. And this is where Jairus asks an interesting question, because he explains about his daughter being sick, probably from the water. And he says, Yusuf, I wonder, and this was actually in the preview for the episode, but they cut it short because you don't get the full line. In the preview, it said, I wonder if I'm being punished by God. But in the full episode, it says, I wonder if I'm being punished by God for believing in this Jesus stuff, something along those lines.
Yeah.
So he wonders, like, is what he is believing wrong? And is it heretical? And is God punishing him?
Yeah.
And that's a legitimate question. Obviously, not every time something bad happens in your life, like that's not a clear sign that God is mad at you. In this instance, God's not mad at Jairus. He's actually giving Jairus an opportunity for Jesus to confirm what he believed. But I just thought that was an interesting question.
Yeah.
Because he is believing something that many people are deeming as heresy. Yeah. And then immediately the worst possible thing could happen. His daughter, his 12-year-old baby girl, gets sick near to the point of death. You'd probably wonder that.
Yeah,
You're probably thinking, like,
it's fair.
Yeah. And he's like, I don't know. And then sorry.
Well, I would say, and especially like we see in the Bible in that culture at that time, a lot of times whenever people were blind or lame or they had like different diseases, they would ask like, how did this curse come upon the family? Like, whose sin is the one that caused this?
Yeah, John chapter 8.
Exactly.
The blind man. Yeah. Who sinned, this man or his father, that he was born blind?
Yes, yeah. So it's like, I think that's also like a common cultural thing. So you could see how he could come to that conclusion with that too.
Yeah. And Yusuf apologizes. And he's like you can see he's kind of heartbroken by this because
he feels responsible.
Well, yeah, and he doesn't immediately discount it. He just says, if that is the case, I apologize because I'm the one by whom you came to believe this stuff. So he apologizes for it. And he says, well, maybe you should recant and take away those, what you say, like what you believe. And I love Jairus. I'm Team Jairus. I need to get a shirt that just says Team Jairus.
A good line.
And he says, it doesn't matter whether I recant what I've said. It wouldn't change what I believe.
Oh, so good.
And
that's
so,
my favorite line from this episode.
Well, especially in light of the context of the scene.
Yes.
He's saying, I'm afraid. And he's never talked to Jesus. He's never seen Jesus. No. He's only read about him. And he studied the Torah. And he's saying, I don't he thinks he might be getting punished by God for believing what he believes.
Yeah.
And he says, but I can't change what I believe.
Yeah.
Because he has become that convinced. Like, he is not, like, he understated it earlier whenever he's like, I don't think that's going to be true. Because the implication was he was thinking Jesus is God. And now he thinks he's getting punished by God. But he's like, I don't know, but I can't stop believing this.
And it's not like this punishment has come to like some random person down the street, like 3 houses down from him. It's his own daughter.
Yeah.
His like that, like his own flesh and blood. That's crazy. Yeah. And that's where he could say that. Anyways, that was like my favorite line in the episode.
No, I thought it
was so good.
Absolutely fantastic. I just love Jairus in this episode. I'm so excited. Like, I'm just excited for him in the next episode to see how he responds to meeting Jesus.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Seeing his girl, it's just so exciting.
It's honestly kind of convicting when you see like how passionate he is, and he's never spoken to or like talked to Jesus. Yeah. Like, he just is like so passionate, just like reading on his own, just studying it on his own. Like, it's kind of convicting.
Yeah, and he wasn't studying the New Testament because that wasn't written yet. He's studying the Old Testament. So go study the Old Testament. It'll teach you about Jesus. So we move on. And speaking of somebody like not want to change their beliefs, now we cut to Jerusalem in the temple. And we have Shmuel and Shammai and the other dude whose name is evading me. I forget him. He was in season 2. And they are gathering for the Sanhedrin, the Jewish High Council. And they've got a little thing that they're going to announce here. And this is probably one of the most significant things that happens in the episode. It's very short, but like, given the scope of the show, like what they establish here, it's not inherently biblical, but I can see where they're heading with it because it's going to have big implications in the show.
Yes.
So they gather together and they announce that anybody teaching stuff that is not from 1, respected rabbis, or 2, where they are invoking the name Son of Man as a messianic title, those people need to be, what do they say? Need to be brought to the, reported to the Sanhedrin. Yes. And so, obviously, this is the product of the stuff that Shmuel has been saying about Jesus, but this ultimately, right here, what they've done here is going to be the thing, which is my prediction, this is going to be how they get Jesus killed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because and not even really as much the first part. The first part, it's like, okay, yeah, Jesus is going around teaching stuff that's not from a respected rabbi. That's not as important here.
Yeah.
It's the second part, the Son of Man part, because Jesus has been going around using this. And specifically at Jesus' trial, you have the high priest standing before Jesus, and he says, like, are you the Son of the living one?
Yeah.
And Jesus says, I am. And you will see the Son of Man riding on the clouds. And basically Jesus is saying, yeah, I'm standing, like, I am the Son of Man, and I'm standing before you, and you think you're judging me, but the next time you see me, I'm going to be judging you. And it's a big moment, and that's going to be the reason why the high priest tears his robes, and he's going to condemn Jesus for blasphemy. This right here is establishing that precedent. Yeah. In the Bible, that wasn't necessarily needed because the implications of what Jesus was saying were very clear. In the show, I think that rather than doing all that legwork then, because I think in that actual scene in season 6, they're not going to want to have to like pause and explain like, oh, what has he done? I imagine they're going to be going more for the emotional payoff there. Yes. So they're laying the groundwork here so that, claiming to be the Son of Man is claiming something that they think is worthy of being brought before trial. Yeah. So whenever Jesus says that, season 6, you're going to be like, oh. Like he's been brought before trial, and he said it to the high priest. Yeah. So you're like, I like that they're setting that up here. So that's going to have a huge impact later on. But then after all this, like it's a very short thing. Like it's like a 30-second speech. No, they raise their hands and they all dismiss. And Shmuel's like, what do we do now? And they're like, oh, that's it. And this is where Shmuel begins to realize it was all political. Like he actually, like you have to understand where Shmuel's coming from. Like he was genuinely convicted that Jesus is a false teacher, and he was wanting to take him down. Once again, he's wrong, but I mean, he was wanting to actually do something about it because, as misled as he might be, I mean, he's convicted by this, right? And he believes that it is genuinely wrong, and so he actually is like, no, we need to take this guy down. But everybody else was just playing it as a political game, and they're like, oh well. We got everybody to vote on our side this time, and so that means we're going to be better in favor next time. And just if that Jesus guy is who everybody who claimed to be, then he'll reveal himself later on. So they're not even taking the Jesus thing seriously at this point. They are simply doing this as a political thing to get everybody on Shammai's side, which is just like church politics. Yeah, that's classic, right? You got the one person who they might be misled, but they're trying to glorify God. And everybody else is just trying to play the political game. Yeah. I worked on staff at a church. I know what it's like. I hope that I wasn't Shmuel, though, because he was misled. Yeah. But I just thought that was interesting that they played that. And it also shows the corruption in the priesthood, which is a legitimate thing from the first century Israel. Like, it was very corrupt and not a good thing. Okay. Moving on. We get a very short scene of Simon and Eden just laying in bed, and they're both awake. And not talking to each other. Sorry, I need to cough. They're not talking to each other, and kind of a sad scene. It is. Just them looking at each other, like Simon's looking over at her, and you can tell that he wants to say something. And Eden is turned away from him, and so you can tell she does not want to say anything. And that's kind of, I think, another reason why, like, I'm on Eden's side, but I think that she's handling it horribly.
Yeah.
Whereas Simon throughout the episode is trying to pursue reconciliation, whereas like she has already just
barred up.
Yeah, like she did not get the response that she wanted at the beginning, and so now she is just like responding in a very bad way, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas he messed up, and he doesn't even know what he messed up for, which is on him. But he is trying to fix things, and it's just not working out.
Yeah.
And so I feel bad.
Communication's not there.
Yeah. Communication, it's key. Then Veronica, we see that she's like in the tent city, right, with the pilgrims. And she's delivering somebody's clothes back because that's how I guess she's been making money or something. She's been like washing clothes, and a guy sees blood all over her feet, and he calls her out on it. It's super embarrassing. And even some of the people that we were watching the show with, they're like, "Oh, why would he do that?" Like, and I was like, "Well,
it's in the law."
Yeah, it's in the law. Like, I mean, you might look at that and you might be like, "Oh my gosh, like, come on, dude, like, you have to do that." Well, according to the law, yeah. I mean, you would call somebody out on that. And so it's kind of a hard place. Like, he probably could have handled it better. Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, he probably could have handled it more graciously or something. But you probably would be like, especially in that culture, you'd be very offended. Because she's also in the wrong a little bit, too. Because she was misleading people. She wasn't telling people. Like, you're supposed to make this stuff known, which is embarrassing. But she was actively taking people's clothes and cleansing them while having this uncleanness, which I think would violate the law. I don't know exactly, but I'm pretty sure that would violate the law because I think if you're ritually unclean, you're not supposed to touch other people's clothes and stuff.
Yeah.
So she was actively hiding this, and so I think he's actually warranted in how he responded there. We might not like it, but we have to realize that the situation is a little bit more complex than we might initially deem it to be.
Yeah.
So she's exposed for that, and so she leaves weeping, and you're supposed to empathize with her, obviously, because I mean it's both sides are probably a little bit in the wrong, but still it's super embarrassing, and that's just the issue. I mean, we see this in the Bible. Like, she was alone. She was not a great place to be in. Yeah. And that's why we're yearning for her being fixed, you know? And then we cut back to Simon and Eden. And I'm trying to figure out what time. So I don't know what time of day this all was. Because Simon and Eden, that was at nighttime. And then we cut to Veronica. And I assumed that the sun was going down. But I'm guessing maybe it was early morning. Yeah. But I'm like, so did she, like, go wash those clothes while it was still dark? Like, that's what I was just trying to figure out. Like, I mean, I guess it would make sense if like she has like the blood and maybe she doesn't want anybody to see it, but it's just kind of weird that she like be bringing the clothes back like first thing in the morning. Like, hey, like I don't know. Some of the chronology stuff in this episode was just kind of confusing me a bit. But Simon and Eden, now they are waking up, and okay, this is where Simon makes a big mistake. Not something you want to say, but he's like, "Hey, something's been bothering you, and I know it's not that time." And he's obviously referring to the time of the month, which is our second or third reference to menstrual cycles in this episode, right? Because there was one whenever Eden was talking with Veronica, where she was asking about that. Then there was this one. There was another one, I think, too, where somebody referenced that. I'm trying to remember where it was. I think there was one place where somebody just like said something about it. It was like, oh, I don't know. Maybe this was the other place. But just like, oh, this recurring theme in this episode. An impasse isn't the only recurring theme in this episode. But he's like, hey, I can tell something's been bothering you, and it's not that time. And it's like, oh, don't say that, Simon. Like, that's not the way to start a conversation here.
He finally says something, just not the right thing.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, so just not a good idea. But then she starts lashing out at him, and they start going back and forth, and like he's so confused, and like you can tell he's wanting to mend things, but he's like, I genuinely don't know what to apologize for, and I think so many guys probably just understood, because once again, I think this is something that, and I think girls have probably felt this way too, but I think I just see this trend more often in guys, where I think girls more often just like hint at what they want. Whereas guys are more likely to just explicitly state it. Yeah. And it's not because they're trying to be blunt. It's just like, it's easier. Maybe we're just simpler creatures and girls are like better at just like, maybe they're smarter than us. I don't know. But guys are like, just tell me, like, what do you want? What do you want? You know? It's like whenever we're like going to get food or something and I'm like, hey, what do you want to get? And you're like, I don't know. It's like, just tell me, like, what do you want? Like, I just want to know. I just want to know. And Simon's like, I don't know what I did wrong. Like, if you tell me, like, I would love to fix it, but I don't know. And like, they're just like going at it. And then of course, who knocks on the door but Jesus? And I love how he just like, they open the door and he's like, hi.
Yeah, he's so like happy.
Yeah. It's like he doesn't even know what he walked in on, which we don't know if he did or not, right?
Yeah.
You know, I feel like you would have heard this from outside, but Jesus walks in and he sees they're arguing, and this is where Simon starts lashing out at Jesus, and he starts saying like, hey, like, I didn't realize this place was going to be a forum for everybody to gather. And the one thing that I thought was maybe questionable, and it's not a big deal, I'm not going to start a denomination over it, but Jesus responds and he's like, why can't a house be both? And to me, it just didn't seem like necessarily the right place or right time to say that, just because Jesus would know. Like, I don't know if that's how Jesus would probably respond there. It's obviously it's debatable, and the creators obviously thought it was right, but because I don't think it was supposed to be a joke. Like, I think he was just making a genuine point. Like, why can't it be both a house and a forum? To me, it just seems like, would that be the appropriate time? And I wouldn't say this is just Jesus. I'm saying, like, if any other character, I'd probably have the same issue. Like, is that the appropriate time to specify that? Because obviously, yes, it can be both a house and a forum and stuff like that. But I don't know if you would do that whenever somebody's evidently agitated and they've been arguing with their spouse.
Yeah.
You know, and so it seemed kind of out of character for Jesus, especially, to say that to me.
I was going to say, and especially, like, we've seen, I think, in other episodes and other scenes, how much they portray Jesus as, like, valuing marriages and your relationship, like, with your spouse, and, like, things that he said before and the importance of it. And so I felt like it was kind of out of place for that reason.
Yeah.
Just because I think he would, I don't know, maybe have, I don't know.
Yeah, and, like, just that the entire dynamic of it was just kind of weird to me because, and once again, this is just me kind of speculating. It's not a big deal. I think this is probably the first place where I have like, Jesus is literally in the scene for like 30 seconds, but I think just the way that he was reacting to stuff was kind of weird to me, just because I don't even know if I agree that that's how you should handle the situation, especially from like the Son of God's perspective. Like, if I walked in to a place, like, first off, I probably wouldn't just invite myself in. And in that culture, I don't think you would just do that either. You'd be invited in. But they kind of just walked in there and everybody starts bustling in. Everybody's like trying to like shut everybody up and like quiet everybody down. Whereas like you could tell that these two people are having an issue. If I was Jesus, I'd be like, well, hey, guys, maybe like we need to give them some space and let them talk. And you might think that's drawing attention to the issue or something like that. But I don't know. Like, I just because Jesus is more aware of that stuff. Because eventually what he's going to say is he's like, hey, like, Simon needs to go handle this on his own. Whereas I don't know. Like, typically, I mean, if I was counseling somebody, I would probably say like storming off in the middle of an argument is not typically the healthiest way to handle something. To be fair, they had kind of ruined their opportunity to handle stuff, and they weren't handling the conflict healthily. So maybe they did need that space. But typically, I would think like maybe they need to actually address this issue, rather than just letting it prolong. Because usually, what happens whenever people are like in this bitter conflict and they like give each other time, what happens is they grow in bitterness, which we've already seen with Simon and Eden. Right. Simon, not as much. Simon's been trying to figure things out, so maybe that's why it's okay for him to leave. But Eden, the more time she's had away from it, the more bitter she's become. And so to me, I'm like, well, they need to actually address this like sooner rather than later. Like, this is kind of like one of those like, don't let the sun go down on your anger type of issues. Like, they've already had like days passing. Like, they need to address this. And so that was kind of like, that scene is probably the first place, probably in the entire show, where I've kind of slightly disagreed with how they've portrayed Jesus. And it's not something so horribly offensive or anything. Like, it's not a big deal. I think maybe just I disagree with the philosophy behind it. And so I would probably handle it differently, and so I'd probably rather portray the Son of God doing it differently. But the creators of the show portrayed him doing it, so they seem to think it's fine. So that, I don't have a problem with that. But they come in there, and then Simon lashes out. He leaves, and I don't have a problem with Simon doing that because he's a human. He's fine. It's whatever. But then and they try to go get him, but Jesus says no. Simon has a few things he needs to work out on his own. And once again, I think we can allow Jesus to do that, mainly because Jesus, he knows, like he knows more than we do. And so maybe as a limited human, I would not encourage people to do that. But Jesus probably knew that Simon's going to go out there and counter Gaius, and something in that interaction is going to set things in motion to where everything's going to be fine in the end. So I think it'll be fine. That was just like probably the first place where I'm like, that's kind of weird. All right, moving on. We get to the Simon and Gaius scene, which I really did like. So I'm glad that Simon did leave, and I'm glad that he did get over there, because I loved this scene with Simon and Gaius. And they start talking about the cistern, and they kind of have this back and forth banter, where it's kind of hard to read, because like it seems like that they dislike each other, but in many ways they're almost just like acting like they dislike each other, because like they're just playing the role of like quintessential Roman and Jew. But then like at multiple times throughout the scene, they just break out into laughter. like it's like they almost realize how stupid their conflict is or something. I don't know. What did you think?
Well, I would say that I think Gaius and Simon have very similar personalities. And so I think that's how they're like. I think this interaction's cool because they butt heads a lot because I think they're both kind of like think that they're really cool. Like Gaius is like, he's like a Roman, and he's like, well, I obviously have authority over you. And Simon's like, well, I'm like a disciple of Jesus. Like they both have this like almost like prideful kind of like mindset, but they're also like very confident people. Yeah. And so I think that their personalities are kind of very similar, and I think this scene really pointed that out. Yeah. And so I liked their interaction because they butt heads a lot because I think they think the same way in a lot of things, but then since they do, they kind of bond over that too. And so, and you see that with them like tying the knots and all of that. Yeah. And so I like the tying the knots thing. Yeah. But... So I think it's cool because I think that the more I see both of them, I think they have very similar characteristics. So yeah. Good stuff. I thought the whole scene. The whole scene was great. So they talk about the cistern and Gaius. Sorry, I was forgetting his name. Yeah. It's literally written down right in front of me. I should have just looked instead. I tried to remember it. Gaius. He explains that Quintus isn't wanting to pay for this stuff, and Simon says, "Sounds like an impasse. The theme of the night." And turns out Gaius doesn't know what an impasse is, so he's gonna have to ask him to define it. And what I liked here, and we already kind of addressed it. Simon starts tying fisherman knots. And this was interesting to me just because it's a little detail. I mean, they drew more attention to it later, but not what I'm talking about. He's stressed. He's frustrated. And what he immediately does is he goes back to fishing. Yeah. Right? I mean, he's not throwing nets or anything, but he immediately just sits and he's fidgeting and he's thinking through things and just like subconsciously as he's having this conversation, he's tying fisherman knots. Yeah. Just because of course that's what he would do. He's a fisherman. And how many times do you think him and Eden had an argument and he went out, he went and got in the boat and we've seen this happen in the show in season 1. Yeah. But how many times do you think he did this, And like to him, it's just like a mindful thing. Like we all do stuff like that. You're thinking through things. You just start doing something that's like, you just know how to do it. Yeah. He's just tying fisherman knots. I thought that was kind of fun. Yeah. And then Gaius offers Simon a drink. And Simon's like, I can't drink from a vessel and like the idea you can't drink from a Gentile vessel and stuff. Yeah. And then this is where Gaius like, oh, you Jews, oh my gosh, y'all's rules are horrible. Yeah. I put Jesus complains about the Jews. That's not what I meant. I meant it was supposed to say Gaius. Typed that wrong. Even though Jesus did have to complain about this sometimes. But then they talk about how they have some things in common because neither Gaius nor Simon want to talk about their boss. And I wonder how interesting it is from Gaius' perspective to hear that not everything is fairy tales about and rainbows in Jesus land, to where like even Simon, like the one who's kind of their leader, he's like, I don't want to talk with Jesus right now. Yeah. And once again, Simon's in the wrong, but I mean, he's human, right? Yeah. And interesting. It is. So neither of them want to talk to their boss. I love this guy. Like they start talking about Matthew, and he's like, "Oh, so you don't like Jesus or Matthew?" And then Guy says, "I'll bet you 20 denarii that you end up liking Matthew." And that's so funny to me. Yeah. Because Gaius didn't like Matthew at the beginning of season 1. Yeah. But he ends up loving Matthew. Yeah. And it's just so funny because like, and they relate in that sense too. Oh like, yeah. Matthew used to be under Gaius. Yeah. And now like Matthew and Simon are together. Yeah. Yeah. And they both think that they're cool, but they both have to answer to people. Gaius has to answer to Quintus, and like Simon has to answer to Jesus. Yeah. And so it's I just found that very entertaining because I was like, oh, that was rich. That was good. And then Simon's like, I don't gamble anymore. And I was like, anymore? I was like, oh yeah, that was like a big plot line. Season 1, like Simon has a gambling problem. Yeah. And so it's just funny how they're bringing it all back around. Like, it's like, hey, you want to gamble? And he's like, I don't gamble anymore. But just the whole idea, like Matthew has no idea this is happening. No, yeah. But like the two people who he used to like dislike a lot, or who used to dislike him a lot, are now bonding over the fact that they both disliked him and that they're both growing fonder of him. Like that's just funny to me. I love stuff like that, just in general, like outside of even a TV show. Like I think about stuff that all the time. Like just when you're not like people who aren't aware that we're talking about them or something. Like Matthew has no idea. And how much would it warm Matthew's heart to know something like that? You know, it would, because Matthew he thinks like because he loves them. Yeah. Gaius advises Simon to lay low. Just like just because if Jesus is around, they need to lay low to keep the stuff down. And he also tells him, hey, you should fix the cistern, which I'm not sure where they're heading with this, because it seems like
that's what they're gonna have Simon do. He's gonna be the one to fix the cistern. Maybe that's how he's gonna be named Peter. You know, he's Rocky. He's building the rocks. I don't know. So they're saying he's gonna fix the cistern and stuff, and then they bond over the whole knot tying thing because Simon makes a comment about like, oh yeah, you wouldn't know sailor's knots, and Gaius is like, hand it over, brother.
Yeah,
he's like, I do know sailor's knots, which is fun. They bond over the knot tying thing, and then Gaius gives him advice as he leaves. He says, hey, if you're having trouble with the missus, I got 5 words for you. You are right. I'm sorry. And I'm not gonna lie. Like, first off, it's funny because I've heard people give advice like that, and 100% that's just like something that I can guarantee you, like Dallas Jenkins or one of his like friends, like they gave them that advice or something. This is how OCD I can be with stuff. What bothered me is that he didn't say, you are right, I am sorry. And he didn't say, you're right, I'm sorry.
Oh.
One was a contraction, one was not.
Oh,
mainly because it was like 5 words. And it was like, you are right, I'm sorry. And like something about that bothered me. It's not a big deal, but it was literally like, it was just being OCD. I was like, pick your lane, man. If you're going to use a contraction, do it both ways. It should be 4 words or it should be 6 words. It should not be 5.
Yeah.
That's what I'm focusing on in the episode. So there you go.
Okay.
First off, Dwayne Smith, thank you so much. I just saw that. I appreciate it. And I am seeing y'all's comments. I just figured we're going to get to those after we finish this recap, because if not, we'll just not finish it. But thank you so much, Dwayne. I appreciate that. And we're going to go through all these comments in a second. Okay. So then we cut to the final scene of the episode. And we have Jairus' wife, who I didn't even realize she was pregnant in the first time we saw her.
Really?
But I recognized this time, mainly because I think I was just focused on the daughter.
Yeah.
But this time she's there. She's like, it's nighttime, kind of ominous. And she's like, hey, Jairus, have you checked on, what's her name? Neely? Have you checked on Neely yet? And he says, no. And then she goes there, and you don't see what she sees. She walks past the camera, and then you just hear, Jairus! And so, cliffhanger ending, clean part 1.
Yep.
And so that is how this episode ends. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through all y'all's live chat comments. We're going to have so many to recap. We're just going to go through them really quickly in a second. But real quick, predictions for episode 5. I'm going to ask you for your predictions.
Okay.
And then I have a question for y'all that I want y'all to answer in either the live chat or in the actual comment section, because it's going to affect some videos I'm going to be doing over the course of the week. So I'll tell you all that. But predictions for episode 5, what do you think is going to happen?
Veronica, I think we're going to get the scene where she meets Jesus and she touches his cloak, his robe.
Yep.
There's so much that went on in this episode. I'm trying to think of things. So Simon's going to build the cistern, and I think that Gaius is going to be secretly helping him, because there was one little moment whenever they were talking at the end, whenever Gaius suggested, he was like, hey, I think you should come and like you should build a cistern. And he was like, the people of the synagogue, they're getting the like materials tomorrow. You can come and build. And he was like, and you know, I'll be here to
oversee it. Supervise. Yeah.
And so I feel like they're segueing that for there to be, I guess, more character development between them two, or maybe so that I think so that way Gaius can learn more about Jesus through Simon. Yeah,
which will probably eventually lean to the whole servant being healed thing or something.
Yes. So I think that Simon's going to go and he's going to do the cistern thing, and that's going to build their relationship to where Gaius is going to be. You can already tell he's a little suspicious about Jesus, and Matthew has already left him for Jesus, and so now he's going to be like, and Matthew was someone that he loved, and now he's going to be talking with Simon. He's going to be like, So I think it'll just pique his interest. And then I think that
they might have more conversations about Matthew too, which could give Simon a different perspective on Matthew.
That's true. Okay, that's so both ways.
Yeah.
And then what is her name? The
Veronica?
No.
Neely?
No.
Eden?
The one with Mary with the olive oil.
Tamar.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just gonna list all the girls.
I was like, hold on a minute. Tamar. I think we're gonna get like a breaking point from her of some sort.
Yeah.
Like just with maybe her greed and her pride. And
I know in the trailers there was a scene where she's like bawling her eyes out and Mary's standing with her. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that there's going to be some type of breakthrough moment with her where she realizes that she has to give up things to follow Jesus. And
I'm wondering how that's going to hit modern audience. Like, I'm wondering if people make the connection.
Yeah.
Because the issue with the Tamar thing is it's so easy to look down on her, but the commentary is that we are all Tamar.
Yeah.
Because how often do we give up anything to follow Jesus?
Yeah.
That's going to be a hard pill to swallow, I think. All right, and then so yeah, my predictions are that we're going to see Neely healed, that she's going to come back to life.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And because in the Gospels those are together, like it's a
Yes.
Markan sandwich. Like in the Gospel Mark, it's also in Matthew and Luke, I believe, as well, in the same sandwich form. But Mark always does this, the sandwich, to where it's like there's the bread and there's the meat, right? And so the story starts off with Jairus coming to get Jesus, and they start walking to the house. And then as they're walking, the crowd is gathering, and this is whenever the Veronica character is going to touch his robe. And then he heals her, and that's where it's like that zoom thing. We saw it in the teaser, where he's like, "Whoa, somebody touched me," and she's gonna be healed. And then they're gonna go onto the house, and he's gonna heal her, right? So I think we're gonna see all that in this next episode. I think we'll see more Tamar stuff.
Yeah.
I think we will see more. I hope we see more Gaius and Simon stuff. It seems like it.
I think so.
It almost makes me seem though that maybe like Simon and Eden's thing like might last a little longer.
That's what I
because like that was the thing, because he was like, if you want to get away from your wife, come to the cistern. And Simon was like, okay, it seems like he's gonna do it. Yeah. Which interested me because I'm like, no, you need to fix this thing with your wife. Like, don't push that off. And so I hope that Jesus addresses that or something, because I'm all about like not prolonging conflict. Like address it quickly. And so okay, so those are our predictions for episode 5. We're about to go through it. We're gonna go through a whole but y'all put so many comments. We're gonna go through these and we're gonna read some of them and hopefully still not go too long. But real quick, put this either in the live chat or in the comments. Every week, what I've been doing, I do an episode breakdown where I just recap the episode. Then I do an Is It Biblical, where I basically look at the episode and I talk about what was biblical, historical, probable, plausible, hypothetical, improbable, and heretical, right? There's nothing heretical so far. And so I go through that. And so there's that second video. And the third video I do is an analysis of a scene from the episode. And this time I've got 2 different options for you. And I want y'all to choose which scene you want me to analyze. Okay, so just tell me which scene, either in the live chat or in the comments. The first scene is the scene between Yusuf and Jairus, where they are talking about Jairus searching the scriptures and coming to believe that Jesus is indeed something. So that is one option. So the Yusuf and Jairus scene. So just comment Yusuf and Jairus if that's what you want. Or the other option would be the Sanhedrin scene, which is a lot shorter, but the impact of that I think will be pretty significant as well. So the Sanhedrin scene where Shmuel and Shammai and them are there, and they're talking about the edict that they're putting in place. And so just let me know whether you want it to be the Yusuf and Jairus scene or the Sanhedrin scene, and whatever y'all choose is the one that I will analyze later on this week. And so that goes that. All right, let's walk through these. I don't know if we're gonna be able to read all of these. What? Further? Oh, we've done. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. So y'all started commenting these a while back. I think they've portrayed Simon Peter as the one who most feels comfortable telling Jesus his opinion and how things should go. And that's consistent with the Gospels. Yeah, Simon Peter was the most outspoken for sure. I want to believe that the miracles seen. We read this one already. We did do that one for sure. Yes, I thought it'd be crazy to actually have those abilities. Watching them do it puts it in better perspective. I couldn't imagine healing people like that. I can only imagine the first person they healed and their reaction when the person was healed. Wow, that was so cool. Jesus patient. Yeah, we did do some of these already. Brienne leading me astray. Let's see. Oh, we talked about the Gaius baptizing thing too, because we talked about how there's limited. Let's see. Sorry guys, we're trying to find the last comment. Y'all have put a lot in here. Let's see. Oh, we did do this. We already gave our predictions, so there's that. Yusuf speaking about his businesses and how he paid. That's Joseph Arimathea. Man, where's the last one that we did? Oh, we did this one. We haven't. Oh, okay. Here we go. Here we go. We haven't had any positive experiences with synagogues. I'm trying to think. Is that true? The John, like in season 2, episode 1, when they're in the Samaritan synagogue, we have, which is ironic, right? The only positive one I can think of is in the Samaritan one.
Yeah. I mean, they were in the synagogue at the beginning, and that wasn't necessarily a negative.
Well, yeah, it was just a boring one, I guess. Yeah, that's true. How many times did the readers say the word discharge? The reader.
Oh, at the beginning in synagogue when they were reading.
Oh, that's the passage he was reading, wasn't it?
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't even pay attention to what exact passage.
Yeah, it was about the cleaning yourself.
Yeah, I noticed Matthew had different clothes. I wonder if he'll have a flashback showing that transition. Maybe. Yeah, he probably just started wearing those clothes before they left. I don't know. The discharge scripture reading was a subtle way to refer to the woman. Yeah, it was so subtle. I didn't even catch that. I mean, as we were listening to it, I was like, oh, this is probably like a significant passage for what's going to come later on, but I just wasn't listening deeply enough to, yes, Brienne, I remember going from sleeping during to drawing color during to actually listening to the pastor's sermon in church. Oh, this is talking about just the way that John is reacting during the synagogue thing. Yes, I remember talking in church, and I still do it sometimes. Shh, don't tell anybody. Okay. How could they fix the cistern? Man, no wonder why Jairus' daughter felt ill. By the way, Veronica is quite an interesting character. Yeah, I agree. The way they'd fix the cistern, I don't know, because they said it was like a busted pipe or something.
So it had to be like something underground.
Well, they'd have to go deep. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know why they think Simon would be equipped to do that.
I was about to say Simon will tell us, I guess.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. Simon's just going to be getting down in the poop. Yes. Jairus has faith because of what Jesus said, which is more than the apostles. I think the apostles, a lot of them came to Jesus because of what he said, not necessarily just because of what they believed, because of what they experienced. Hey, David, it would be a mind-blowing cameo if Nicodemus showed up at the very last scene after the feeding the 5,000 and the end credits roll. That would be a good way to end season 3 to prepare for season 4. Maybe. I'm hoping. So
I love Nicodemus.
I looked at the season 3 devotional thing they have, and they actually have some scenes that like they have like some scripture references that go beyond the feeding the 5,000, and I think it has to do with maybe, I don't remember, I should have taken a picture of it or something, or bought the devotional. That probably would have been helpful. I think it had to do with like the healing of the demoniac once they crossed the water or something like that. So they might end with that. I don't know. Personally, how I'd end it to make it really dramatic is I would have the disciples out at water, like they're out on the boat, and a storm hits, and it's just like things are going really badly, and they think they're going to die. I think that'd be really dramatic, because then it'd be like, oh, walk on the water. But I don't know. This episode was amazing. There's so much to take away with this episode. Yeah, it was really good. It wasn't my favorite episode of the show, mainly just because I think there were some storytelling things that felt more inconsistent. Just because I was having, as I was watching it, I was having too much of a hard time trying to figure out when exactly things were taking place. That to me kind of takes me out of the show a little bit, but the content of the show and the dialogue and stuff was still just as rich, and I really liked Matthew's house. I know Tamar was getting onto them about it, but I thought it was good because we really haven't explored Matthew's house that much. We've really only seen like one room,
like bedroom.
And so I thought that was really cool. I think Eden being unreasonable by not describing her issue with Peter. I feel like her character is normally forthright with him. She called him out season 1. I think the issue is that she's just getting tired. I think that's the whole point. I think they're just trying to show that, yeah, she's not perfect. And yes, in the past, she's been very patient, but she was also excited about the idea that, I mean, like on one part, like at the beginning of season 1, she's fighting for her marriage because her husband's just being like a schmuck, just going doing this stuff. And so she's fighting for that. And she's being the one holding their marriage together, really. And then for the back half of season 1, she's so excited about like Simon responding to Jesus that it's just real like, so we really haven't seen that. Like, this is, time has passed. I mean, it could have been over a year at this point. And I think she's just getting tired of it. And James says, I'm with Simon. Thank you, James. I think that Simon's getting a bad rap by people, but yeah. For a woman living in the first century, life was tough. For example, carrying water for miles away to home, washing dirty clothes at the creek while the husband was an apostle, now not having a job. Yeah, I mean, Brienne was talking about this. I mean, their shoulders, man, they had to be ripped.
I would imagine.
Yeah, because they had to do that. Does anyone really believe that Jesus would address Lazarus as Laz? I believe it. Yeah, why not? Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's possible he was good enough mate to end up doing what he did, right? It's reasonable to suggest he had a nickname, I reckon. I like this episode because this is like the first time we see a high-ranking Roman official wearing a white robe. Like this, honestly, I felt like Gaius was in his pajamas. You know?
You feel like
I felt like I wasn't supposed to be seeing. Like, it's funny because in most shows, in most shows you see Romans walking around like that, but whenever he walked out, I felt like I was like supposed to look away. I was like, oh my gosh,
he didn't have his armor on.
Yeah, it did feel kind of weird, and that's what Simon even commented on. That was funny.
You're not carrying a sword. I am armed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, forgot about that. I like this episode because this is like the first time we see. Oh, sorry, I just rewrote the same thing. I'm getting tired if you can't tell. This Simon Eden dynamic's extremely relatable for me. Haha, my wife and I struggle with finding discussion time in a very busy home with our little kids running amok. Yeah, I imagine. I mean, I feel like every single like household should probably relate to this a little bit. And if you don't, wow, that's amazing. Maybe I'll need to talk more. I guess it just seems like it was too much slang. I have no problem with Jesus using slang. Yeah, I mean, why not? He was human. I mean, do you use slang? I use slang all the time. Yeah. And so I would totally call, why not? It's also a good way to sort of highlight that this is a take on what may have been around scripture, right? Okay. Some of this stuff is like interacting with one another. Tamar has become unlikable to me pretty quickly, but I'm interested to hear more about her background. She lived with rich people. Yeah, so I would agree that Tamar has kind of been a little bit more unlikable in this season.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I've got to be careful there because
We fall into
that's the issue. We find Tamar unlikable in this show because she's doing all the things that we're guilty of.
Yeah.
Like, that's the issue. Like, we're the people who, I mean, I'm just gonna call us all out here. I'm the person who sits here with lights shining here and looking into a camera, making stuff for the internet. And y'all are the people who have the time to sit down and spend a few hours watching a guy talk about an episode of a TV show.
Yeah.
That means that by and large, we've got pretty good lives, right? And so when we're looking at Tamar and we're finding her unlikable, we have to realize that we might be in the same place as her. Because imagine if we were being asked to give up everything in the same way that she is being asked to give up everything.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yes, she is kind of unlikable, but I think that this is one of those places where we have to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? The same judgment we pour out on another will be poured out on us. Yes, she's a fictional character, but every good story points back to an element of truth. And I think that they're doing a really good job.
She's like the young rich ruler?
Yeah, she is very much like the young rich ruler. Yeah. The episode, in my opinion, is one of my least favorite. I don't know if I'd say it's one of my least favorites. I haven't really had any that I could say least favorite. Obviously, some are my least favorite, but it's just almost by like, I don't know. I'd have to spend more time on it. This episode was a little bit more complicated for me because there was just so much in it. I'll have to rewatch it a few times to figure out where it lands. We'll do a ranking video at the end of the season and everything. I just signed you up for that, by the way. Okay. It's kind of like being taught how to do a math procedure without understanding why that procedure works to get your answer. I'm not sure what that was in reference to. Oh, it's talking about the power without understanding. Was that a real bird? I want to know, and I don't want to know. I don't believe it was a real bird. Oh, no, actually, I feel like I saw a behind-the-scenes thing about this or something, just on accident. Like, I think it was a real bird, but it was already dead or something like that.
I would imagine.
Something like, like they didn't kill it or anything. But it was either a prop bird or a bird that was already dead. I believe it was already dead. His brothers are called Jude. Okay. I wonder if Zebedee going all in, setting up Salome to go all in as a follower of Jesus as she was there when he had risen. Yeah, that's true. Let's see. Could the struggle of Big James also connect to the nature of Jewish upbringing during that time where Rabbi may have been seen as above the working class and they have received years of prep? I don't know. I don't really know where they're heading with the Big James stuff. I really like some of that because some of it's just so like it's just fictional storylines added into the show. I'm not good at speculating that stuff. My expertise is finding where places line up with the Bible, and I can give you speculations based off that. Other than that, I'm just along for the ride, and I almost don't want to speculate because I enjoy the excitement of figuring it out.
Yeah.
But
surprise factor.
Yeah. Let's see. This episode is probably one of my this is the same comment. Okay. They didn't have germ theory in the 1st century, so it's much easier to see how they might believe sickness could be supernatural punishment. I mean, but the thing is, even with germ theory, sickness can be supernatural punishment.
Yeah.
We don't want to discount that because we see that in the Bible. We just don't want to say that it immediately is supernatural punishment. That's the distinction. It's definitely, it can be. This episode is one of my favorite. It's all the buildup of the miracles. Ooh, we're getting some conflict. I think we need to get, let's see, AJ and Travis in the ring, and they can duke it out and say, is it our favorite or least favorite? Silly question, but are we going to wait until season 4 to see Lazarus, Martha, and Mary again, or we might see them in following episodes? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. I would think we wouldn't see them again until next season. Just the way that it ended off last episode, it seemed like it was like, hey, I'll see you next Rosh Hashanah. So it's like next year.
Yeah.
So I don't think we'll necessarily see them back again. They could surprise us, but I don't expect it. This episode was good. It just felt like the first half of a movie that stopped halfway in, just when it gets going. The next episode will be the payoff. Eden did annoy me a bit, and so did Simon. It's funny because I was kind of on Eden's side for most of it, but I will admit that she annoyed me more just because I think we have the expectation of her being better. Whereas Simon, we're kind of used to him failing. And so even in his failure, I was like, that's just Simon being Simon.
Yeah.
Whereas this is the first time we really started seeing major cracks in Eden. I was like, oh, whoa. Interesting. Shalom in Jesus Christ, name, hallelujah, amen. Look at that. So many different foreign words, but I liked it. Okay, that's addressed to somebody else. I agree the first half of the story thing. Yeah, I mean, the next episode is going to be a lot of payoff, which is really cool. And Jesus is back, which is good news. I was saying it was a good episode, but it felt like the first half of the movie that was stopped halfway and got going, and Eden annoyed me a bit. So did Simon. Simon, who at the wedding in Cana was ready to go all the way, couldn't even go to his house with the group. All of their arguments in the group annoyed me here. I will admit that I think some of the arguments that the group people were having would make a lot more sense if they were younger.
Mm-hmm.
Just because some of the stuff, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess there are grown men who get into arguments like they were there. I just maybe not surrounded by a lot of guys who do that. Like usually if me and my friends have a disagreement, we just kind of talk about it. And we like, but they were like getting like pretty heated and like all of them like bickering back and forth. Typically, if you got grown men doing that, like fists are going to start flying. And so I don't know. But to be fair, this also is Jewish culture, and Jewish culture is actually more prone to that type of stuff, like get more into heated debates and stuff. But I don't know, like that scene, I will say that a lot of them were annoying me, but I can understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
I don't look at the apostles as like, hey, look, these guys are supposed to be perfect. The whole point of the show is that they're learning to follow Jesus just like we are.
Yeah.
So even if they annoy me, I'm like, hey, I annoy myself plenty of times too. And so, yeah, Simon stormed out of his house. Yeah, it's kind of funny, like leaving your own house, and like also leaving your own house. Like he's just like complaining to them about like how they're storming Eden's house, and then he leaves them alone with her. Probably not a good move.
Yeah.
I mean, like, hey, honey, like, I know that you're already doing all this work, but now I'm gonna leave you to take care of the house by yourself
with all the people.
Which once again, that's where I would think maybe Jesus would be like, hey, Simon, get your butt back here, and go like act like a little child later. I don't know, but I don't know. Too picky. Get on with it. So much else to discuss. We're here for the long run. Don't get on to me about that. I think Jesus was completely in character here. Man, he's like, guys, this is what it is. Pick up your cross, and the show is going on. I guess how hard it would have been at the time. Almost easier now. We do have a lot easier now, for sure. Let's see. The Sanhedrin seemed to be setting up an edict to trap Jesus in his words, similar to how the satraps made the law of only worshiping on Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, I actually thought about the Nebuchadnezzar thing during that scene. I thought that was interesting. I would have done it differently. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. We have to realize this is not our art project. We're just here analyzing it and talking about it. And if you want, we can always go make it ourselves, but it probably wouldn't be nearly as good because they're doing a lot better than I definitely could do on this show. Tamar is royalty, and remember, she was a flour merchant when first witnessed the healing of the leper, so I'd expect her relationship with money could be different. Yeah, we just don't know much of Tamar's backstory. We got more of it here because she said she was like traveling all over the place and everything. And
Egypt.
Yeah. It's funny that you find you have in common when you start talking. Yes, yeah, for sure. Simon's a fidgeter. Absolutely. We just need like Jesus to walk up with like a fidget spinner, and he's going to be like, these are going to kill it in a few thousand years. I wonder why Simon made that Matthew comment. We've seen him warm up. We've seen him warm up towards Matthew, but at the same time, like they haven't had like a reconciliation scene. Yeah. Jesus' specialty is doing things people are censored for doing. He has authority as God, for sure. Then we have Dwayne. I think we have all had times where we didn't want to talk to God. Yeah, that's one thing. I've seen a lot of people have that response. I don't think I've personally ever had something where I've like never wanted to not talk to God. I don't know, but I think a lot of people can empathize with that for sure. Eden was bathing in the trailer. Is that? Oh, okay. Movie like the episode trailer. I was thinking like a trailer, and I was like, okay, I was like, what were you watching? I was like, oh my gosh. Yes, she was. I know. So Simon's not going to be building something like a mikvah or anything. In the trailer for the TV for season 3, she's bathing in a mikvah and she's cleansing herself. Like she was ritually unclean. She's having to cleanse herself. And most likely the common theory right now is that she's going to have a miscarriage, probably, but we don't know for sure. Season 1 and Season 2, with the exception of Season 2, Episode 8, didn't have any cliffhangers and all wrapped up nicely. I wonder why the writers have so many cliffhangers now. It's curious. Cliffhangers are exciting. I like cliffhangers. They add tension and they make you excited to see the next episode. So if Gaius is going to secretly help Simon in what he later gets caught by one of the Romans or by Quintus, could they kill him or arrest him? Silly question. Could they kill Gaius? I don't know. Romans had special privileges beyond just what Jewish people had. Hi, David. Happy New Year to you, Brienne. Hey, Medina. And your family's just watched episode 4 and caught the Snipe Life live stream, so I'm a little late joining you guys. That's all right, Medina. Glad to have you here. Season 2, episode 5 was also a cliffhanger. That was, what did season 2, episode 5 end with? Was that was with Mary going missing. Yeah. Hey, Whitney, the pool scene you mean? Yeah, we could see in episode 5. Yeah, I think that the mikvah scene is going to be later on in the season. I think it's going to be what are some of these people's comments? I'm just not going to show on this thing. Oh wow, this is well, I need to block somebody real quick because that is inappropriate stuff on this channel that we're not going to allow. Sorry guys, that's been sitting there for a while that I just didn't see. Yes. Okay, let's see. I honestly think this episode is probably one of my... Okay, this is the same comment we've seen before. I think some of this is actually just going... Oh, sorry. I'm seeing some of y'all's comments now from a while back. So if it's weeks or months between episode 4 and 3, as you say, does that mean all 12 apostles completed their mission? Yes, all 12 of them completed. So they're all back now. And we saw all 12 of them gathered around the table. Mm-hmm. I think she is afraid of being taken or killed. She can give him a son. Oh, Eden being afraid of Simon being taken or killed. Yeah, that's possible. I mean, she'd be concerned for sure. Let's see. You might want to block. Yes, I did. I blocked him. Don't worry. Sorry, I was just right behind. Look at this optimism. Praise God, guys. Levi is feeding the algorithm beast for the guys, so YouTube pushes this rad show out to more people. There you go. That is yeah. Let's see. My guess is that Eden was going to tell Simon she was pregnant. The changes in the house are classic nesting habits. She wanted Simon to notice and ask why, so she could... That's what I'm thinking too. Yeah. I'm thinking that she is pregnant and that was what she was trying to tell him, and that's probably why she's reacting so frustrated, because she has this exciting news and he wasn't picking up on any of it. Once again, I still think that it could have... Yeah, she could have handled it better. Let's see. My issue with Tamar is her comments about Matthew and especially Mary, knowing that Mary has been abused, which Tamar doesn't know. It was cruel. Yeah, Tamar, once again, also not perfect. Also, just an FYI, we are going to be closing this out pretty quick because this live stream has already been a lot longer than I anticipated. But thank you so much for all y'all's interactions. I appreciate it. Let's see. It didn't seem realistic when Tamar criticized the decor. Most people in that time had very humble homes and few possessions. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% there. It does suggest that Tamar came from higher, like, but I do agree that they probably wouldn't care that much. James and John's conflict is a bit off to me. It seems like they meant to add more scenes, but stuff was cut out. I think they could have focused more on people getting jealous. Yeah, I was thinking that a lot of this episode seemed to me like there were deleted scenes or something, and that could go back to the whole them saying that they wanted to do more with the 2x2, but they had to condense it. Yeah. That could be a big part of it, because it seemed like we were missing a lot of the story, and it could be that we're supposed to feel that way and that they'll flesh it out in episodes to come, right? Like, because we still don't know much about their mission, and I'm assuming that we're going to get more details as the episodes progress, and so I think that's definitely possible. Simon was looking... Wait. Oh, Simon was looking for that proverbial corner of the roof. That is a good comment. So good. Yes, better to stay on the corner of a roof than to dwell with a contentious woman. Yeah. Yeah, he's like, yeah, where's that corner of the roof? That was so good. Better to live in a house with a dripping water. It's great. Think they'll circle back on the Thomas and Rama thread? Hopefully. I mean, they can't build that all up and then not pay it off.
And Jesus mentioned it last episode.
Yeah. So. Yeah, so they'll definitely do that. Good night. Have a happy new year. Yes, we are going to... Yeah, let's see. Excited to see more of the woman with the issue of blood. Yep, and we'll see that next week for sure. A good stream. Have a good night. Happy New Year. Excited for episode 5 next week. Yes. Happy New Year, everybody. Look at that. Oh, geez. There we go. All right. Yes, everybody. We're going to close out now. Thank you so much. Let me get rid of this spoiler banner so you can just talk. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a really long stream, but that's okay. We're here to talk about The Chosen. Yeah. We will hopefully see y'all next week. But until then, like I said, I'm going to do my breakdown of the episode. I'll do my Is It Biblical? And then I will also do my scene analysis, and be sure to comment below and let me know which scene you want. Either the Yusuf and Jairus scene or the Sanhedrin scene. Let me know. I will do whichever one gets the most votes. And that should hopefully be coming to you throughout the next week. I'll be busy, but I'll get it to you. Until then, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you know when other videos like this are coming your way. And also, if you don't mind, share this with a friend or two. You know, I mean, if anything, to talk about The Chosen, but also, you know, get people talking about the Bible. Be cool. Do you have anything else you want to say, Brienne? I know I did a lot of talking at the end, just like reading through that stuff, but it's because I know that you're probably tired of doing this too. Isn't she so kind and gracious to just do this with me? Because really, this whole YouTube thing is more like my thing, but she just like goes along with it. She's such a trooper. She's like, yeah, I'll sit there for 2 hours and talk about The Chosen. Like, everybody give Brienne a round of applause, and just maybe go in the chat and just like say how awesome Brienne is, because, you know, I appreciate you being here. So thank you. Sweet. All right. You have anything else you want to say? No, all right. Okay. Y'all have a great night. My name is David.
And my name's Brienne.
And this is Now Let's Be Honest. Be sure to keep a smile on your face and don't let anybody steal your joy. And I will see you later on this week. Bye-bye.
Bye.